All right, so I welcome you all to the Maine Recovery Council, and I am going to ask that we start with introductions, so that members of the public who are in attendance will know who is here. And I'm going to start with those on Zoom. Ben, can you introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin Mann. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Finance. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Ben, see if we can hear you.
Can you not hear me?
No.
I can hear you, Ben, just fine.
Yeah.
Right
Thank
now?
you, Eric.
Try now, Ben.
Can you hear me now?
No, let's.
Test. Check.
I wonder if the others.
Let's try somebody else. Miles, can we hear you?
Can you guys hear me?
Okay, we can hear Miles. Miles, can you introduce yourself?
Hi. Well, I can hear you, Ben. Sorry. My name is Miles Willett. I'm a supervisor at an outpatient facility here in Aroostook County. I'm also someone with living experience. And I'll pass it to Keena.
Sorry, there's echoes. Keena Thakkar, I'm an infectious disease addiction medicine doc.
Thank you, Keena. We're having a little bit of problem here. Ben, you want to try it again?
Can you hear me now? No?
I'm trying, guys. I promise.
Yeah, sure.
Sounds like everyone on Zoom can hear me, but the room can't.
Correct. We can all hear Ben just fine.
I'm going to assume.
We can't
folks
hear you
dialing
all. Just be patient. Thank you on the Zoom.
I apologize.
So they can hear us.
They can hear us. We can't hear them.
Looks like we don't have a good signal. It's very
Yeah.
choppy.
Yeah, is it
Well, and it's coming through the speakers in here instead of the owl as it should be.
No, the video is very choppy.
Well, yeah.
It's like we don't have good
The
signal.
Wi-Fi signal is showing you.
Yeah, I mean, it's connected.
To the one that it's supposed to be connected to. Weird, that was pretty good.
Prison, the account, there, see if we can help us.
The only thing I would know how to do is to shut it down and start over again. Sorry.
Yeah,
Well,
Works more often.
what are we gonna do?
It's like so weird that actually does work. They're like,
there's an angry guy out here. And there's a little rather than see if we can.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna wait on introductions to those on Zoom. Because you can hear us, but we can't hear you, and we're asking for technical assistance, so be patient. So thank you very much. So for those in attendance, from the public, we have also joining us, we have Ben, a man who is joining us, who's the treasurer, and we have Eric Small from the Sheriff's Department, as a member of the council joining us. And we did hear Miles and Keena, and I think that's all that's on the Zoom. So can we go in here and start? Paul, would you mind starting?
Paul Benzel, addiction medicine physician at Spurwink and Central Maine Medical Center.
Gordon Smith, the state's director of opioid response in Governor Mills' office.
Bruce Nod, Maine Reentry Network, a person in long-term recovery and a person who lives with mental health challenges.
Joe Everett, CEO of the Opportunity Alliance in South Portland and the chair of the grant department.
Thank you. Can we go over here to Liz?
sure, I'm Liz Blackwell Moore. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the director of public health, Cumberland County Public Health Department.
I am representative for the Cranston House District 46.
Betsy Fitzgerald, representing municipalities.
Pat Kimball, Recovery Ally, Chair of the Maine Recovery Council.
Mary Coyne, coordinator of the Recovery Council.
Katrina Bonich, AG's office.
I'm Brendan O'Neill. I'm with the Attorney General's office. I want to introduce a new colleague, Grayson Havens, who joined our office filling in the position that Haley had filled, and will be helping us with the administration of the council. Grayson, do you want to say a few words?
Hi, I'm Grayson Havens. I use they, them pronouns, and I just want to talk a little bit about, my background. I, in college, was the parliamentarian and the president of my school's student senate. So I'm happy to be a resource for you guys anytime you have questions about Robert's rules of parliamentary procedure, anything like that. I would love to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Welcome to the team.
Grayson also comes to us from the American Bar Association, where you did some work with their civil rights committees, is that right?
Yeah.
So we're working for sort of a similar group. Not the same subject, but you know, has some background with all that too. So I just want to welcome Grayson to our gang.
Welcome,
Welcome,
Grayson.
Grayson.
Thank you. All right, just a couple announcements before we start. One is that just reminded everybody that September is Recovery Month. And I hope that somewhere in your communities where you live, that you get an opportunity to participate in the many events that are happening in regards to celebration of recovery. It's certainly a refreshing piece to be able to have your communities join us in celebrating recovery. So I hope that you all can participate in some way. I don't see her here online, but I did want to take the time to congratulate Courtney. Courtney, is Courtney there? Oh, good, I can say it while she's coming into the door. Courtney has received an award by the Bangor Recovery Network. She is going to receive the Jean Baker Advocacy Award, which is an award every year that the barn gives out for someone outstanding in our state and community who advocates for recovery. And so Courtney will be receiving it, I think, at Recovery Palooza.
Yes, I'm excited.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So thank you.
And I survived my first cold call today at law school.
Oh, right.
It was terrifying.
Okay, so, I want to, inform you that, at the 30th of the month, the executive committee will be meeting and we'll be going to executive session. In order to do that, we have to have a motion from the council, to do that. So I'm asking for a motion, and then a second, and then we will vote on it.
I move that the council delegates to the executive committee established and governed by section 6.3 of the council's bylaws, the task of reviewing the current conduct of the council's coordinators, specifically the past year's experiences and performance of the coordinator. And because the contract's term ends on November 1, 2024, all potential actions to prepare for its expiration, such as renewal, amendment, reposting the position, or other alternatives, the committee shall make a recommendation to the council for the action at the council's next meeting on October 10th, 2024. Further move that the council authorize the executive committee to meet in executive session to complete this task pursuant to section 4.10 of the council's bylaws and section 405 subsection 6A of Maine's Freedom of Access Act, codified in Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1 of Maine statute.
Do we hear a second on that?
I second that.
Yes. We have Paul seconded. Who seconded it? Paul, I think, yeah. So the question I have at this point is, do we have voices to vote on the Zoom? We're trying.
Can you hear
Can they
me?
show a hand? Or do they have to
They
have
have
a
to-
voice?
They have to.
You just need to go up to the, oh, there, never mind, it's already closed.
Yeah.
They have to speak and be on camera, okay.
Yeah.
It was just
Okay.
Ben that we couldn't hear.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we have, right. So if there's no, it's been moved and seconded on the executive session vote. Is there any questions or concerns? If not, Grayson, will you call a roll, please?
Liz?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Betsy Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Eric Small,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Lydia Crafts.
Yeah.
Joe Everett.
Yes.
Miles Olet,
Yes.
Tina Thackrar,
Yes.
Bruce Naughton,
Yes.
Paul Vincil,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
and Courtney Garriott.
Yes.
Passes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. And we will report back at the October meeting. Just want to briefly go through the agenda. It's changed just slightly, but not much. We will review the minutes. We'll have a conversation with Brendan about contracts and some other information that he wants to share with us. We'll have the coordinated report, which will be in conjunction with the grants committee. We're actually going to have a presentation today in regard to substance use research evaluation and learn more about that and what it has to do with our work from the Cutler Institute. We will have the finance committee meeting and then adjourn. As always, it's a pretty packed meeting. I'm going to try to keep you all on task and on time. I don't always do that well, but we're going to give it our good old try. So thank you. Any questions about the agenda? All right, so we will go to reviewing the minutes. So here is, I'm going to make a suggestion. So you have 3 months of meetings to approve. You have June, July, and August. If you approve them all in one fell swoop, we run into problems because of some members that won't vote if they don't think they can vote if they didn't attend a meeting, which leads to a quorum. Well, I've checked with Robert's rules, and technically, if you're comfortable, you can vote on the minutes even if you did not attend. So if you agree with that premise, I can ask for a motion that we approve all 3 at once and call a roll, or I'll have to go through them individually because you won't have a quorum if you go through them individually. But if anyone objects, I don't have a problem, we'll go through them individually.
I move we vote on all 3 together.
Second.
Yeah. I'm just looking for consensus so it's been moved to second and consensus. I don't see any hands. Does anybody? So mostly approve it. Okay, so I'm asking for a motion that we approve the June, July, and August minutes of the Maine Recovery Council.
So moved.
Been moved. Do I hear a second? Second. Lydia seconded. Any questions, concerns, adjustment in any of those months' meetings? All right, if not, Grayson, call it in a roll.
Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Lydia Crafts.
Yes.
Joe Everett.
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Bruce Naughton,
Yes.
Miles Olet,
Yes.
Eric Small,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Tina Thackrar,
Yes.
and Paul Vincil.
Yes.
Passes.
Thank you. Motion carries, and thank you very much for making that adjustment. All right, next on the agenda is a report from Brendan in regards to contracts and other information that he has to share with us.
Just briefly on contracts so that we can get to the other things on the agenda. I presented recently about both the SSP contracts and the prevention contract with the Harold Alphon Foundation to the Finance Committee and to the Program and Grants Committee. And I'm well underway work on both of those. With the SSP contracts, Mary and I have had a tentative conversation or an initial conversation that, because it's meant to be the same contract for all of the organizations, that when the council satisfied with the contract, will, present it to all of them and invite them together to, discuss with me and discuss, and Mary, the contract. But the goal is to have the same contract for all of the organizations. And I'll work with Mary on setting that up. Other contracts that, I've got going on are, started conversations with, the Maine Youth Action Network, which is the other branch of the prevention contracts. I've got, now I'm also thinking about the coordinator contract as well as the Barry Dunn contract. So all of these are in works, and I'm working with my office on the process for that. So that's my brief update. Pat, can you remind me the other things that you thought that I needed to talk about?
Mary, under her report, is gonna talk about, the one that we talked about earlier about the grant process.
Okay.
She's gonna talk about that under her report. But I did have a couple questions and we didn't get to it earlier, Brendan. Are you researching the process under which people determine whether, how the terming off of terms works yet? Are you prepared to talk about that?
So I have, there's sort of two questions that, that you had given me. One was, and I think Courtney's raised this, whether the language in the memorandum of understanding means that the most you could serve is 2 terms and then you're done for the rest of the life of the council, or does it mean something else? My office is going to take the position, as I understand it, that what it means is you have 2 consecutive terms, after which you can't serve again until there's a break, and then you can serve after there's a break. So you're not barred for the rest of the life of the Recovery Council, but the most you can serve consecutively is 2 consecutive terms. And then the conversations are continuing internally about the process of reappointments and how that's gonna work.
Okay.
I don't have more to report on that at this time.
Going back to the other types of contracts, Tessa's house, Tessa Lee Libby founded.
Yeah, it's, I think it's part of my, it's in that mix as well. I haven't started that work. I've got the other ones much more developed.
If they were, I don't put you on the spot, unfairly probably, but if they were to ask me, what would be the expectation based upon current workflow? Would you say that you'll be getting to that contract and they might be able to see the draft of
The most precise that I'm willing to be is within the coming weeks. But I'm not prepared to be more specific.
Right. Well, that's how specific I'll be with them. That's okay.
I'm learning this process as much as you all are. You've already experienced with me that these take longer than sometimes I have anticipated in the past, and I want to be respectful of that. But I'm keen on, it's important to me to get the money out for it.
Is this a resource issue? Like, I'm just very aware that we made decisions in December. I'm not picking on you, Brendan, but it's now pretty much October. So do we need more resources? I just think this is like, because everything's playing out very publicly.
Yeah.
So people watch that meeting in December, like December 15th, and now it's almost, so I just raised that and not that I can answer, but I think that needs conversation because I work closely with y'all, so I know like we can be faster, but it's the research.
There's been conversation in the finance committee, which will talk a little bit more about contracting out services for additional help, so we can, again, move faster on things, but it's a staffing issue, not the workload of the staff that's here. It's definitely that we need more staff and more help, but under the finance committee, we're hoping to have the conversation about contracting services out and what that looks like to lessen that load. With contracts, I think it's a matter of, once we start getting those out, there'll be more boilerplate kind of thing, so they'll be faster. Right now, again, if you remember, what, in the beginning, in December, when we voted on it, we thought, oh, this is easy, we'll just tag it on to state contracts, and then realized we couldn't do that, and so that slowed us down and put us at a point. So again, I think as we learn, we will get faster, but it definitely is a staffing issue in regards that we need more support to really move forward in an efficient manner. But thanks, Joe, for that comment. All right. And I think the only other thing, I think I'm gonna wait for finance that we talked about, Brendan, was the voting on the funding issue of expending.
Yeah, there are two funding, two contract related or sort of contract related matters that have not been voted on by the council. One of them, I think we do have to vote on. The other is a question whether we have to vote on. The first on contracts is, I'm, based on guidance that I've, received from the finance committee and the council heard this as well. I'm proceeding with the contracts that, with them having a cap on administration expenses of 10%. And I am taking the view that indirect costs are part of the admin expenses. So all the contracts I'm writing have that position. The council's never voted on that I'm aware of. I don't know whether or not the council needs to or wants to vote on that. But that's the position I'm taking with all the contracts I'm writing. The other issue is, there was a discussion at the last council meeting about whether the chair had the authority to authorize expenses up to, I think it was $1,000. The consensus was that, as I recall, the council wants that. Whether that's the right dollar amount, I don't know. But the council wants the chair to have that authority, but the council, to my knowledge, hasn't voted on it, doesn't actually authorize that. And the way it would happen is, the council would, what I would propose is the council would approve a change of bylaws that, where it describes the chair's position. That's found in section 5.4 of the bylaws. And it would just be to add a sentence that says the chair has the authority to approve expenses up to and including, and whatever the dollar amount is. I had heard from the council that $1,000 was what folks were comfortable with, but maybe it's a different amount. And so those are the two things that I think the council could consider.
Gordon?
Does the finance committee, has it been a vote for the finance committee to have any authority to spend money without the full council?
I don't know that council's considered granting the finance authority that, the finance committee that authority. Ben may have a different recollection.
Ben?
We definitely discussed it at the finance committee. I need to look at my notes on whether or not we had a vote.
So.
Well,
go ahead.
well, I asked the question because we've struggled on here, we need to do our work and we need to accelerate where possible. It strikes me that $1,000 frankly is too low, that, I just learned today, it's nobody's fault, but that our staff couldn't go to a given conference that we'd authorized because they couldn't get the approvals in time. I understand the bureaucracy and how things work, but it seems to me that I would raise that amount, frankly, to some other dollar amount, to maybe 2,500 or 5,000, but I'd also like to see the ability of the finance committee to bump that to the next tier, so that the chair, if something came up, again, we have millions of dollars. We've taken it very responsibly, and we will continue to be very good stewards of that money. But at some point, we can trust each other, and so I would I'm prepared to make a motion. I don't know how you'd like this to flow, Pat, but to authorize the chair to be able to approve expenditures of up to $2,500. And further that we refer to the finance committee a proposal to allow them to approve expenditures up to $5,000.
Second.
So moved in second. Any discussion on that?
I'm not clear on what,
Yeah.
what the finance committee would approve.
Well, it would simply be if some expenditure came in at, say, at $4,000, it's more than we've authorized chairperson, but it wouldn't necessarily wait for the next council meeting or put together a special council meeting. Should at least bring the finance committee together. So I was just trying to go to that next level. But I thought it was better for us not to make that decision, but to refer that to the finance committee. They might come back to us in October with a recommendation that, well, actually, we think we should have the authority to do $10,000. I mean, so my motion that Courtney has seconded is clearly takes care of the chair's authority up to and including $2,500. And referring to the finance committee to ask them to come back to us with a recommendation as to how they would feel about being able to authorize expenditures of up to and including $5,000.
So I'm not validating the motion. I think I would suggest those both need to be higher.
Okay.
I think that like we have a lot of money and I know it's fair, there's a lot of scrutiny, but I would just suggest, and I like the idea of fun. If I could influence the finance committee, I think it should be $5,000 and $10,000. But the finance, I just think that's low.
Yeah, again, I had concern because say, for instance, the coordinator, Mary, wanted to travel, her airfare alone, and then her hotel, and then her expenses again. So I saw Paul and Ben, but I also don't know if Ben as treasurer at this point would like to have both of these items, the 10% cap and admin and this expenses, be at the next finance committee meeting with them bringing back a motion for the board to vote on. Or did that make more sense? But Paul had a question then, Ben.
So the purpose of having the chair be able to approve expenditures for expediency. If we moved it to the finance committee, if it was more and it moved to the finance committee, that would put a delay. If the finance committee was gonna have a meeting just to approve the funding, that would still have to be publicly.
Correct.
So I wonder if we should skip the finance committee altogether and just have the chair have the approval for whatever amount we decide. Just for expediency purposes.
Ben?
That was gonna be my technical point too. I mean, the finance committee can only meet with under notice. So the council might be meeting sooner to approve something than the finance committee. So presumably the council could obviously take up any vote that we needed to, but the finance committee might slow things down if instead of speeding things up, if we need to go, if we have expenses from 5,000 to 10,000 or whatever the thresholds are.
I believe my motion is on the table.
Still on the floor.
I'd be willing to withdraw my motion so that Joe or others could start fresh if Courtney's willing to withdraw the second. And then, so it looks like we got that done. And then I think that now that we understand and have been reminded that the finance committee required a two-week public notice, that we should keep it simple. We shouldn't refer anything. I'm not speaking now to the administrative 10% thing. That's
gonna go to the finance
That is
committee.
really more complicated, but this is pretty simple, and the only question is really
what do the others on the council feel is the appropriate amount? It sounds like people are comfortable with 5,000, but that's the only question in my mind is, okay, what level do people feel comfortable with? And is there general agreement on that? And then I'm happy to make a motion or somebody else.
Courtney?
Could we do up to $5,000 for the chair with a yearly cap of some number?
Oh,
So like,
yeah,
Pat, I love you. I don't think you're gonna do this, but Joe Schmo.
yeah, oh, yeah, you always have to, yeah.
I mean, you need limits on things.
Yeah.
Spends, Joe Schmo spends $100,000 over the course of a year and you're like, whoa, how'd that happen?
Yeah, that is a valid point, because I'll tell you, $5,000 I'm comfortable with, approving, like if Mary wanted to go up to there. More than that, it one at a time, I would be uncomfortable without.
Right.
Well,
that's
we're still discussing, there's no motion on the table, so I don't like that idea of a yearly cap, but because I presume that any expenditure that is approved between meetings of this council will be reported in the chairperson's report, at the next council meeting. I don't think that even needs to be part of the motion. To me, that would be something that we would all deal with, so that if we can see that, oh boy, the chair really approving these $5,000 expenditures, we can deal with it at that time on an ongoing basis. And I think it's just kind of premature to suggest that, well, to have a yearly cap and what that cap would be. I think we should keep it pretty simple. But I don't know what the amount is that the council would be comfortable with.
It is hard to get money out.
So I think that Pat is suggest, you're feeling comfortable at $5,000.
That's, as a chair, I would be uncomfortable if the coordinator came to me and said she wanted $8,000 or $9,000 without bringing that to a meeting. I would be extremely uncomfortable with that. That's just me personally. 5,000 to me, if I knew particularly that we're including airfare, the price of a conference, all of that, or if it was software to purchase for grant writing. Again, but more than that, I really think it should either go to the finance committee for, suggested approval or come to the full council for that. 5,000 was, again, that's me personally, and I don't have a lifetime appointment to this position. So again, you have to vote what you believe as a chair is a reasonable amount of money for them to approve without going through full council.
Knowing that we can always change the amount later in any other meeting, I'm going to move that we amend the bylaws to provide the council chair with the authority of, under section 5.4 to approve expenditures of up to and including $5,000.
Second.
You moved and we have a second. Any further discussion? No, if not, Grayson, can you call a roll, please?
Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Lydia Kratz.
Yes.
Joe Everett.
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen. Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Bruce Naughton,
Yes.
Miles Olet,
Yes.
Eric Small,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Tina Thackrar,
Yes.
Chassie Toole,
Yes.
and Paul Vincent.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you very much for the vote. And Ben, can you put on the agenda for the next finance committee that we'll discuss this a little bit further, as well as we will discuss the 10% admin cost at the next finance meeting? Thank you.
Pat, with all due respect, we've discussed it at the finance meeting already, the 10% overhead fee. And I mean, I'd look to our notes if Ben has them available, but this has been discussed, it's been discussed on multiple occasions, and I think that the full council needs to make a decision at this point.
So I'm gonna leave that to Ben to see if Ben is comfortable with those discussions that we've had at the finance committee to hear a vote today, or would you like to discuss it further?
I think, so I don't want to, this issue gets fairly technical, and, I don't want to conflate the issue of admin versus indirect admin. So the 10% cap is related to the indirect rate on top of the expenses to deliver services under contract. So, so if they were, if a provider was hiring 3 people to deliver services, obviously the cost of the salaries wouldn't be part of that, nor would, say, supplies or utilities. Those would be separate expenses. The indirect rate would be on top of all of that. Is that what we are all, is that a common assumption here, or do we need to have more specificity on what is included or not included in the 10%?
That's my understanding of what we're discussing.
So no, I might be a lone voice, but I know I've said this before, that organizations like TOA have a federally negotiated indirect rate, it's not 10%. So if we were to take a contract, we'd take a loss. So I think it could eliminate a lot of good organizations by capping it at 10%. So I probably don't have the vote to change that, but I think I just want to voice that concern on behalf of the organization.
What's the amount in the MOU that says it can be?
The amount, the settlements provide that you have to spend 85% of, generally 85% of money on abatement activities. Admin that is, has been described about providing the services would be part of the abatement activities. To the extent that expenditures are made for things that cannot be characterized as abatement activities, there's a 15% cap on
Courtney.
I have a question that I think is probably directed to Mary. One of the places we look for information is what our other states do. Every state faces or is facing this issue. So I'm wondering if you have in your network of people that you talk to across this country doing this kind of work, what kind of indirect rates are these other states approving for their opioid spending, if you know?
I don't remember the exact range off the top of my head. I do know that Ella supported the development of a table though, where we looked at every state's rate and definition. So we do have that information. I believe we shared it with finance a couple months ago.
And I think with the full council as well.
And I do believe the finance committee recommendation came from that discussion and from looking at those resources.
Okay, I do believe that I recall that document, and that 10% was a common number. There were some that were higher, some that might even been lower, but that it was kind of within the range. My second question was going to be one that Joe has already answered. It's a tough one. I was going to ask, well, do we think at 10% that we would be precluding projects and applications from organizations that have federally approved higher rate? And it sounds like the answer is that, yeah, very, very possibly. I mean, and obviously any organization can decide that, no, we're going to, this is okay for this one. But the only thing, do we have, is there a motion on the table?
No, there's no motion on the table.
I mean, the only thing I was thinking was that, one way to think about that would be to establish the rate at 10% with the council's ability to waive that rate in any single case. Now, maybe we don't need to add that because of course we can anyway. So, okay, with Brendan nodding, I won't suggest adding that to the motion. And to move it along, the way I got most important thing we do today, I think, is approving the application. I will move that we set as the the limit for indirect expenses associated with these projects, the number of 10%.
It's been
So
moved and
questions
seconded.
from Paul and.
Well, can we second it and then take questions?
Second, and I just have one thing to add to that. I think we have to set it at 10% because if we, there are limits within within the MOU of 15%. And we have administrative costs as a council, Mary being one of ours, more important than just administrative costs, but unadministrative costs. And so the other 5% is what we're gonna be paying for Mary, we're gonna be paying for our Zoom account, we're gonna be paying for all of these other things that we just wanna pay, what we need to pay for. So that we can't go higher than 10%. We need the other 5% to pay for our things.
That's a good point, Courtney.
I don't think that that's the math is that simple.
Yeah, that's not,
I don't
I
think
think that's not how that works with the MOU, but I'd have to get a more clarification, but I don't. I think we could afford to if we wanted to. And the issue is, do we want to?
And I can come back with more specificity about the cap that's in the settlements,
Yeah.
the 85% that I'm talking about. It's different in different settlements, but it all revolves around the cap. It all revolves around driving the money to be spent on abatement. And then there's non-abatement activities. So I can come back with more specificity about that. I don't know though that, you know, it's possible that that may lead the council to say a higher, you know, percentage would be preferable. So far, it doesn't sound like that's the council's appetite about that, but I'll come back with that information. I also saw the question from Miles and.
Miles has a question, and Paul had a question, then Miles, and then we're either gonna have to take a vote or move on, because we have lots of other stuff on the agenda, so.
It's taken me a little bit of time to understand the idea of indirect cost. So my question is to Joe, what type of things go into your 15% of your institution?
So they're all costs that are approved by the federal government, so it's quite a rigorous process that you submit annually to get it approved, so it's the finance department, it's the support departments that are included in direct. And if we submitted a proposal and said, well, we're gonna say HR is direct, the council would say, no, you're not. Because the federal government, well, GAAP accounting sort of lays this out, so it's all those sort of non-direct service charges that are the cost of doing business.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand it. But that's
So
okay.
it's
If other people do it.
the HR, the finance,
Okay.
all the folks that are not directly
I
providing
see.
the.
So they pay those, you pay those salaries and staff and supplies for those departments out of those contracts. And you estimate that that's gonna total about 15%.
Yeah, and it's more than 10%. I think ours is like 14 or something, but some are probably as high as in the 20s. We talked about this, so I think, and to Gordon's point, I mean, an organization can say, and Ben, I don't want to step on your toes, because you are the finance guy, but TOA could say, you know what? We're gonna take a loss on this, but on the books, it'll be a loss.
Yeah.
Because we have to allocate evenly across all the programs. We can't say, oh, Project X is only gonna say 10%, because we'll have an audit finding and be in trouble with the federal government, who monitors this quite closely. So that's just the dilemma, but organizations could say it's important and we're gonna fundraise, because they'd have to find other money to fill that gap in that budget line, in that cost center.
Miles and then Liz, and as I said, we're gonna have to either take a vote or table it, because we need to move forward. Miles and then Liz. Miles?
Yeah, I was also with Paul, I was having some trouble understanding what those indirect costs were. And then I didn't know if that 10% admin cost included staffing.
So Miles, I'm not sure if you're directing at me, but it would include the staff of those indirect positions, like the HR director, the CFO, the finance people. Those salaries would come out of the indirect.
Not the staff
Not
that
the
works the
clinical
program,
staff.
but it's your administrative offices, your executive director, finance, those things, that's what's indirect. That makes sense?
It's the most common examples, Joe's right, is like basically the C-suite of corporations. So the sort of corporate governance of an organization, and if that organization also hires like a CPA, if they have certain audit obligations, so for an annual, to produce the financial statements every year, if they trigger that amount of, if they, there are certain thresholds of funding that you get from the feds that require certain audits. So like that CPA firm and the C-suite, those costs would go into the indirect rate that we're talking about here. Basically, staffing to deliver services would be direct costs and would not be considered in this indirect rate. I just will slip up from time to time. I do think it's important to call it indirect rate and not admin, because admin will get confused with other things related to contracts, whether it is, and like an indirect rate is the indirect rate.
Thank you.
Well, I just quickly, I think there are lots of organizations that take the de minimis, which is 10%. And then there are other organizations that have federally approved rates, right? So I think, like this idea of for-profits, I think we want to know what are people's financials, right? So when they apply, we can ask them for their budget and they put in their de minimis or whatever their rate is for indirect. And then we say, like, we can look at that and say, that's a reasonable amount and here's what it includes. I think setting it at 10% is going to cut off people. It's going to cut off organizations that can't do it because they don't have a tax base or another way of funding the stuff that makes the programs happen. So that's part of their infrastructure. So I will be voting no, because I believe we should have it put into, like, let people apply and tell us what their indirect rate is, and then we can do the math. Like, this does or does not work for us. It makes our admin rate of 15% that the MOU says too high, but give ourselves that option as opposed to like cutting out TOA or cutting out a university whose rates are too high from applying.
Thank you. One more question and then.
There's no motion.
Yes,
Yeah,
there is.
there is a
Oh, I made.
You made the motion.
You made the motion.
You want to read back the motion? Does someone have a motion?
And did what the.
I
My
seconded
favorite
it,
second.
and I'm not on seconding it.
Betsy has a motion.
That he can't go any higher than 10%, and that, to set that indirect rate at 10%. Can't go higher.
It's been moved and seconded.
Just in discussion, I've really been impacted by Lynn's comments, and I'm not gonna withdraw my motion, but I'm going to vote against it. Because I agree with her that at this point, particularly where we're early in this process, we can look at that. I mean, I've told you, the university is a great partner of mine in my work. Their federally approved rate is bigger than Joe's, I bet. And I don't want, I think we can look at it. We might be competing, we might be looking at 3 competing proposals, say, well, one of the things that this one is 27%, their indirect rate over here is only 17%. We can make those decisions at that time rather than have a low rate that would discourage people from even applying. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other?
Can I just say one
discussion?
last thing to add to what Liz is saying? I just think that our industry is really struggling financially. And I think to apply this across us is just gonna make it tougher for organizations that we're not fat cats. I mean, TOA, we may have a larger budget, but trust me, we struggle like every other organization. And I just, I'll be voting no too, because I think it really limits our potential partners and also just isn't in the best interest of the sector.
All right, thank you. I am going to at this point ask for a roll call, please.
Liz Blackmore,
No.
Lydia Craps,
No.
Joe Everett,
No.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
So,
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
No.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Bruce Naughton,
No.
Miles Olet,
Yes.
Eric Small,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
No.
Tina Thackrar,
No.
Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vincent.
No.
5 yes, 9.
So that the motion, it does not pass and it will go back to the finance committee to have discussion as to how we will deal with that as budgets come in with our grants. I thank you all for the discussion and the vote. And we will move forward to Mary's report, the coordinator's report.
Before we do that, well, I guess because it's part of my report, there are a couple other votes I think we need to make related to contracts. The Program and Grants Committee recommended that we change the allocation of the 200,000 startup set aside for a new SSP site and allocate that to Needle Point Sanctuary, $100,000 in year 1 and $100,000 in year 2. So, correct. So we would just need a vote to move forward with that and make sure that's reflected in the contract. As a reminder, the current motion or vote was to provide Needle Point Sanctuary $75,000 as the 18 sort of SSP site for year 1. And then in year 2, we would already have the 18 sites allocated for funding. We just need to make that change.
And what's the reason for that one?
It was a recommendation from Program and Grants, I believe, based on the need that was identified in Bangor and the work that Needle Point's doing, needing some extra support right now.
And they came on as the newest right after
They
we
did.
approved it, so they'd get it anyway, and they're in the middle of an HIV crisis, and
Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you.
And Mary, for clarity, that would leave $175,000 18th syringe exchange available.
Yes, yep, so that gives us 75,000 still currently unaccounted for in year 2. So if a new site comes up,
We still have.
yeah, we still have that.
What's the recommendation?
The recommendation is to change the allocation to have Needle Point Sanctuary receive $200,000 over the course of 2 years instead of becoming the 18th certified site and receiving the $75,000 per year.
So they would be receiving
an extra 25,000.
more than the established sites, which are getting $75,000 per year per site. How many sites does Needle Point Sanctuary have that are certified presently, do you know?
I only know of one. And that's all we're currently accounted for their funding.
I'm going to support the motion because even though they have received, I believe, the amount of $100,000 from the CDC, not associated with the SNP program, but directly for their work on HIV, and that's fine. So but notwithstanding that, I do think that for a lot of different reasons, and because we don't know of another, at least I don't know of another applicant out there this year at this point in time. It's money well spent, in my opinion. I will support that allocation if somebody makes a motion.
And just clarify before this motion. Mary, what I understand you're proposing is the council's prior vote had allocated 200,000 to the 18th SSP, but in different chunks. It was meant to be 75,000 in year 1 and 125,000 in year 2. Now we're talking about equal 100,000 in each year. So it's the same 200,000, just divided differently. The
Yes.
first issue.
Yeah, because we voted on Needle Point after the December allocation, and so we pulled from that 200,000 to give them the year 1 funding of 75, and then we had 125,000 left over. So now we just need to make sure that vote's changed. I don't know if we just amended, but for us to write the contract, we need that.
And then for the other 17 SSPs, the council had allocated 1.275 million for the 17 in year 1. and then 1.350 in year 2, which would include, that higher number would include the 18th SSP. So is the proposal to have those 2 years be the same number of 1.275?
That was not part of the recommendation, as far as I recall. It was just to change that 200,000 set aside to reflect 100,000 going to Needle Point instead of just 75. And year 2 also.
100, okay. So in year 2, there will still be 1.350, 1,350,000 coming out the door.
Theoretically, it allows us room for an 18th cycle to receive that 75,000.
So you're not overspending what we approved, we're just changing the allocation on this one contract.
Just to clarify further, it's not to allow for an 18th, it would be to allow for a 19th. We now have 18, don't we, with data point?
True.
So
But it's not,
the higher number would be to allow for, that other new SSP.
it would allow for another SSP, yes, to receive that $75,000, but only for 1 year.
And then would be
And it would be the 19th receiving funding from us.
So I think those two numbers, at least for my sake, both 19 and the, change in the distribution of at least that's how I'm understanding.
Gordon, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Glenn has his hand up. Who does? Oh. Ben.
Thanks. Just two clarifications. Needle Point is getting an extra 25,000, or we're just changing the allocation between year 1 and year 2?
They're receiving an extra 25,000 in year 1 and year 2, above the 75,000 that we had previously voted to
Okay.
work on.
And how did this request come for consideration to the Program and Grants Committee?
Don't recall.
Well, my recollection is we were discussing the SSP contract at the Program and Grants Committee generally regarding all the SSPs, but I can't recall or speak to why or how the Needle Point specific matter came to the Program and Grants.
Because they were the newest one who
They
came
were the
on.
newest one.
The set aside was for the new one.
Okay.
And then we talked about the HIV cluster in Bangor in particular, and how Needle Point is really on the front lines of that, which I think further justified the decision to provide them with extra funding.
But the request did not come from Needle Point.
The request did not come from Needle Point.
Nor did it come, to my knowledge, from the CDC. It came from communications that we knew that we had this money set aside for any new applicants, and that we knew that they were a new applicant. And then they became a more significant new applicant because of the HIV outbreak. And I think it's public now how many cases there are and how much of that is from intravenous drug use. So that's how it came to be. And I think that is important to know that I think it's been well explained. Does that satisfy you though, Ben, as to where the requesting?
I think so. So thank you for that. And just in the funding that we're using to increase their amount was unallocated, but set aside for syringe service providers already. Is that correct? For maybe situations like this or other new SSPs that were coming online?
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Mary would like a motion that we, how is that going? The motion is that we increase.
Oh, but we need to, I don't know what the legal language would be, but that we need to change the allocation for Needle Point
Adjust.
to
I
receive.
move that we amend the previous amount provided to Needle Point Sanctuary to, and to establish a new amount of $100,000 a year for a 2-year period.
Do we hear a second?
I'll second that.
Paul seconded. Any further discussion? No, Grayson, will you call the roll, please?
Liz Blackmore,
Yes.
Lydia Kraft, Joe Everett.
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald. Yes. Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Bruce Naughton,
Yes.
Miles Olet,
Yes.
Eric Small,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Gina Thackrar,
Yes.
Chastity Tool,
Yes.
Paul Vincent.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
I have one more contract discussion, also in regards to the SSP sites. So we discussed how the funding would be allocated and that each site would receive $75,000. So some organizations are receiving $150,000, $225,000, depending on how many sites they oversee. But we didn't discuss, as far as I'm aware, how we are expecting the SSP organizations to allocate that funding. And if the organization was to spend it as they wished, or if we expected them to spend $75,000 on services for each of the specific sites, which is what was allocated for initially.
I'm happy to respond to that.
Great.
Chair Kimball. I feel quite strongly that the allocation should be to the organization. It would be micromanaging, in my opinion. We have 2 certified sites in Franklin County. What I remember is that we wanted to emphasize flexible funding, supplies, staff, outreach, whatever you need to do to provide this harm reduction service. And if the administration of the operators of the site say that what we really need is an additional outreach worker over here, and they can do 10 hours a week over here, we don't need to say that, oh, you know, it has to be exactly $75,000 for each site. I feel pretty strongly about it.
And can I just broaden that to the whole December funding package? I think that what Gordon just said is true for all that work. It was really supposed to be low barrier, easy out the door, supporting people. So thank you, Gordon. I totally agree with.
Yeah. We're not trying to complicate it. We're trying to make it easy. Ben, you have your hand up.
I don't disagree with that. I think this happens frequently at DHHS, particularly with licensed operators and different licensing requirements. And I don't think we have that instance here. I do think some funding should, I don't think a particular location should get 0 funding though. I don't know how to operationalize that, but if we could at least suggest that it doesn't need to be 75,000 exactly, but I think the funding was intended to support the sites, which is why we did it on a site-by-site basis. So I think irrespective of whether it's 75 or not, I think all sites should get something.
Then Courtney, Brendan, then Courtney.
Just to follow up on Ben, Grayson looked into this a little bit and reviewed the meeting of the finance committee at the end of July. This was discussed at the finance committee and the notes seem to indicate that in that discussion, the group felt that the money should be allocated per site rather than in an aggregate basis and have the entity determine which site gets how much and so forth. So I flag it only because it seemed like there was a different perspective in that meeting that I took away.
Is there a specific, concern or reason why we're having this discussion, or is it just for contracts?
Mary wants for the contracts. They need to know whether the funding is going to be spent, given to organizations or given particular sites. If an organization has, if I'm right, there's more than one site, is our expectation that each one of those sites gets 75? Or can the organization determine how it's distributed. So you're giving the money to the organization, not to the site.
So I think I was probably one of the most vocal on that July meeting, I can't remember, but, I'm comfortable with the harm reduction organization making decisions of what is best for the program broadly with the money that they receive, as long as it's moving towards supporting syringe exchange and harm reduction programming broadly, because I think we talk a lot about the exchange, but it's not even, syringe exchange is not about syringe exchange, it's about the programs that go around syringe exchange. So as long as it's moving their organization forward towards more help for the organization and for the people that they serve, that's fine with me.
Great. I don't think we need a motion on it. I just wanted to be sure we had that clarity.
All right. You don't need a motion, then thank you for the discussion.
I don't think so, right?
I'm gonna write the contracts, unless I hear, disagreement with this, I'm gonna write the contract in a way that roughly was described, by Courtney and Gordon.
And I can assure the governor's second appointee, or maybe the first appointee, that I will share the sentiment that all the sites should benefit. But that the organizations that operate these complicated sites should ultimately decide what resources get invested where, because a lot of it will be shared. Correct. I think.
Yeah.
Programs that
well,
have multiple programs,
Yeah.
but it's all interconnected in some way. So I think just making sure that, like writing in that if you're getting for 2 sites, both sites remain operational.
Yeah.
Like, that would be the only piece. Other than that, split it around how you think need. Like one area is gonna need more of money than the other.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Go for it, Mary.
You could have a presentation, please. I'm gonna start, I have a slide pulled up that was intended to be presented at our July council meeting. And it provides an overview of what my letter of intent review process looked like. And now that we are at the end of the LOI review, we just wanted to do a review of my process with you all to make sure it's been approved and we can move forward. It is the third slide. I'll just give you a brief overview. The way I captured our letter of intent submissions via Qualtrics is that I captured every submission that was submitted, started, in progress when our submission deadline passed. So there was about 480 responses. You can go to the third slide. Thank you. Great. 480 total responses. I removed submissions that were deemed false, which it was false if Qualtrics determined it was not submitted. I then removed test submissions, which included submissions that you all had submitted when I first asked you to, as well as some that were quite obvious as test submissions. Part of my process was also looking through to remove any incomplete submissions. So I looked at submissions that were missing 3 or more fields. As I mentioned, having gone through those steps prior, there were still some submissions that could have been submitted where an organization just went through part of the LOI process and not the whole thing. So I went through and did that review. And then as requested by applicants or for my own outreach, I also removed letters of intent that were either had errors in them or were not meant to be submitted, or they wanted to be taken out of the evaluation process. One thing that we did find when we did sort of a quality check on this process, and I've gone through it 3 times, Grayson did, Ella did, there were 4 submissions that we found that had 3 or more missing fields. They had the first 6 fields that were not submitted. But after reviewing the subsequent fields that were submitted, there was quite a bit of information that was provided. And after speaking with Brendan, you know, we are of the belief that the intent was for those to be completed submissions. But from my review process, again, they were excluded based on not meeting some of these criteria. If the council wishes to amend this process, what we'll do is we will have those submissions go through the evaluation process, and then those average scores will determine if they are invited to submit a grant application. But I wanted to bring that to you all before we, again, completely close this LOI process.
Sorry, how many applications, how many letters of intent are we talking about?
There were 4, and they were all missing the first 6 fields, which are organization name, email, primary contact.
Exactly. Was there like a technical glitch or?
We went back through, and they were not, and this is an error on my end, they were not required questions. But that was the only glitch where they could have been submitted, the application could have been submitted and by the applicant deemed complete, because those weren't required. But those same 6 fields were not completed for 4 submissions.
Brendan?
Yeah.
To their point, another way to say it is those 4 submissions answered every required question, including one at the end that says, paraphrasing, is your submission complete? They said yes. And we received it. You know, there are flaws with with those required fields don't include things like the organization's contact information. So, for example, if the council reviews them and says, we like this one, or we don't like this one, it would be a challenge for us. We would have to Google them to find them and contact them and so forth.
Because we had no contact information on them.
Because those were in the non-required questions. But if you're, you know, if you're a submitter of one of these LOIs and you complete all of the required questions, there's a, basis to be able to say, I did what the council asked me to do.
And so do I understand?
Courtney and then Gordon.
So do I understand then that they were ruled kind of out of order? They were not scored, they were ruled ineligible.
Correct.
Even though
That's
not the right term.
I wouldn't say ineligible. Mary, if I could, you should correct me if I'm mischaracterizing, but I understood Mary's first cut as the coordinator to be those submissions that were not actually submissions. They were tests. They were, somebody abandoned in the middle of the process. They, entered gobbledygook, random letters and numbers as a way of trying to, or they were duplicate submissions, things like that. These 4 are different than those.
But they were not scored.
They were not scored.
No, based on my process, they were deemed incomplete, and so they were not included in that initial
Now,
evaluation process.
going back and reviewing the process, which is really good for us to do, make sure everybody's treated fairly. You've discovered this issue and you're bringing it to our attention as to whether we wish to go back and explore those. So my question is the staff, including both Mary and really Brendan, are you making a recommendation to the council or just making us aware of this?
Making you aware of it, because in order for us to conclude the letter of intent, I do believe we have to just approve this process. And again, I just wanted to flag those, and it's up to the council how you'd like to move forward.
I think, the way I would characterize it is, if these applicants answered all the required questions,
They should be scored.
I don't think it's quite accurate to call them incomplete applications. They've answered all the questions that all of the other applications that got reviewed did.
I would like to submit that they are incomplete if you don't put in information around the name of your organization and your contact information. So I think that's like in terms of them not being required, I would say that a general public layperson or anyone would consider those necessary for submission. And so I would like to approve the process. I would like to make a motion to approve the process that Mary has set out for us for the LOI review process.
Second, maybe seconded. And I do have one question that Miles wrote in, before we take a vote. Unless somebody else has any questions. Miles asked if we reach out to those organizations.
I will now, I will Google them and try to find the best point of contact.
Again, remember, there's no name or contact information, so
No, you should know, absolutely not.
there's no name, no nothing, so. Yeah.
Also, just for the record, it would be, I don't know what the word is, but we already know the process now. We know the outcome. We know which scores they need to get to win in this. I'm not saying this right, but you can't go back to scoring because when we scored all the other ones, we didn't know that over 14 was gonna be the ones that moved forward. So it would be unfair to the other people.
So there's a motion on the floor that we officially approve of the process that's put in before us. It's been moved and seconded. Any other further discussion? If not, Kristen, can you call a roll, please?
Liz Blackmore,
Yes.
Lydia Kratz.
Yes.
Joe Everett,
Joe's not here.
Betsy Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen.
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Bruce Nodden,
Yes.
Miles Olet,
Yes.
Eric Small,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Gina Thackrar,
Yes.
Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vinsel.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much, and Mary, and team, thank you very much for all the work that you did on the forefront of all the LOI letters and the work. And thank you.
I gotta take us back to an SSP question that I just got a text on for clarity. Needle Point has 3 certified sites, Bangor, Milo, and Waterville.
Oh,
How many do we think they have? Just the one?
so I only have the one. Milo and where else?
So I guess the difference would be the remaining for the 19, because now there's 20.
Well. So.
I know I backtracked.
We've already,
I just got it.
well,
But the vote was based on sites, not business.
Right, those are their 3 sites.
Are they all certified sites? Milo, Waterville,
but didn't we, I mean, they're really becoming eligible for our funding because they're new.
Right.
And they're participating in the new money that we set aside in case there are any new ones. And I think, what was that total? 200?
Yeah.
200.
We just gave them all of the available new money, did we not?
Yeah.
Second year too.
There's 75 per year.
Where did that extra 75? If we set aside $200,000 and we're giving them $100,000 in each of the next 2 years, what am I missing there? Where's that extra 75 come from?
We set aside 200,000 in year 1. And then we set aside 75,000 in year 2 to sustain the one that we opened in year 1. So there's 18 in year 1, plus $200,000 for a new one. And then in year 2, there's $75,000 to sustain the one that we opened in year 1. So 19,
So it's a little bit of the new,
18, sorry,
it's a little bit of the new money and a little bit of
old money.
old money.
So year 2, this is gonna become a problem because we were only anticipating adding 1 site.
Yeah.
We can give them the 200. But it just means that moving forward from here, we actually have, instead of what we projected to be 19, it will move up to.
21.
21.
Oh, no,
Which
sorry,
has
we were at 17, 18, 19, 20.
Three of the.
We're adding 3 sites.
Oh, from, then we voted in December, yeah.
And the council, as my understanding is the council's now decided to allocate, the funding to the entity and let them determine, how within the entity you know, among the sites to allocate the funds. So, I mean, there would be a shortfall, because it would be, for Needle Point, it wouldn't be 75 per site. We could still go forward with. Is that right?
They would have to find this out on us.
Say it again.
They would have to deal with the shortfall, not us.
Correct.
Yeah, so they would sort it out between their three sites.
Right.
That 200, but then moving on, I thought we said 75,000 per site.
Yeah, so the 75,000 per site in year two, funds 18 sites.
So for clarity at this point, I think, and to move on, I think this will go back to finance to figure this out and bring it back to the full council and say what they've discovered in regards to whether it's an increase of funds that we just voted on or not.
So super quick, I know we have to move on, but what we just did actually is that if it, you know, we thought we were giving them more money, but really we gave them less money, because if we were giving them $75,000 per site for 2 years, they would have got $450,000 over the course of 2 years, and we just gave them 200,000, so they just got short of $250,000. Because we didn't know they had 3 sites, but we can figure that out later.
So we can figure that out with finance and bring that back to the full council as to what that means.
I think what I'll want in the finance committee is a listing of every site.
Yeah.
So that we, because the math is really confusing to me. I don't know if we're talking about 18, 19, 20.
You're absolutely correct. And the finance committee can look at that allocation, then bring it back for a vote and figure out where we are money wise with that.
We'll
Thank
put
you.
together a spreadsheet that has, you know, all of the entities, all of the sites, the year one funding, the year two funding, the refunding, so that you can see how it all goes.
Right. But that also means that you have to change the total allocations for each of those years if they're gonna get more.
We may, we're gonna have to look
Might
at.
have to, that's.
Well, you have to bump those total numbers up.
Well,
But
I would think that we should send it to the finance committee and get their recommendation. Whether we have to bump it up, I think is a question that the finance committee can come with a recommendation and then we vote. But I don't know how much we'd be voting for. I need to really.
Yeah, we don't know at this point. I mean, I wouldn't be, I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't be comfortable in voting. We just took a vote thinking we understood it. Now we're saying we don't quite understand the finance. I would like the finance committee to come back, review it, and come back to us. Chastity, one more question, we'll move on.
I don't know that we need to refigure new amounts or anything. Everything we just voted on is there, and then we knew that there was gonna be 75,000 left. And now we just know that there's already the existing sites that are gonna be coming on. Cause if we have to do this every time a new program comes on, there's gonna be multiple programs coming on. And I.
Quickly, and then we move on.
It's a question really for Brendan. I just want to make sure that what we've done and the referral we're making for future reference to the finance committee is not slowing up for one day.
Correct.
The work, the most important thing is get the money out to these organizations now. There's a lot of inequities. The next time we go to year 3 and 4, we might want to look at, well, let's look at the annual report and see how much activity. We're giving the same amount of money to sites that might have 10 clients as we are to sites that have 600 clients.
Right.
We made that decision. I don't want to change that, but this is a work in progress. The most important thing is get them the money now.
Yeah.
We can work out the nuances later.
Yeah, we're not gonna stop contracts and moving that
Right.
forward. We're just gonna,
Okay.
yeah. And finance meets on the 30th of the month, so.
One.
All right, thank you. But excellent, we're getting money out the door. Mary, let's go. What do we got?
That's actually. Can we go forward a couple slides, please, until it gets to the grant application questions? Given our time, so all of you have in front of you a copy of the grant draft. And my goal for today's meeting is to have any final feedback on the content and structure of this grant so that it can be published and our invited applicants can get started. Again, we're moving forward at a quick timeline, with the hopes of having a recommendation for grant awards by our November meeting, which is the last full meeting of this Maine Recovery Council. So that is why today it's important that we have any last minute feedback. I can bring your revisions or changes to the Program and Grants Committee on Tuesday. And then I believe Program and Grants has the ability to make the final sort of award and vote, and then this can be published and put out to applicants.
I have one question.
Yes.
In part based on the conversation we had before about the 4 applications that didn't have name, rank, and serial number on them. Should there be something at the top of the page that said, fill out all the spaces?
Yes.
Or something along those lines? Everything is required, or just so that there is absolutely no question that if you choose not to, then you choose at your own risk.
Yes, we can.
It's just a
I
suggestion.
will say, Betsy, there'll be a lot of people who won't answer the questions, that we can guarantee.
Happens all the time.
They don't answer the questions.
Okay.
So that will be part of the scoring process,
Right.
is that people didn't answer the questions, so you get a low score.
Right, and I get that, but what I'm
Yeah.
saying is that those 4 applicants that didn't put their names on it, I mean, come on, you guys, what are you, first grade? But that,
But it'll all just go out in the wash is what I get what I'm saying.
Be their parents.
thank you, we're not their parents.
Yeah, they're right.
I said it, I
They
did.
just get less points if you don't answer the question.
Okay, well, all right, then I still throw that out there that it might be. Yes, it is.
We will have language about the council having the ultimate discretion over scoring and review and all of that, so I
Yeah.
think it'll be encompassed.
Okay, all right, fine,
And Brendan and I have talked about that.
then I'll take back my idea.
I'll move through this quickly. What I wanted to discuss with you all is last council meeting, we had gone through some of the LOI metrics and saw, we have 163 submissions that were invited to move forward, and we have far more funding requests out there than is probably ideal for us right now. With that said, last month you had all wanted to put some sort of information within the grant application about what the applicant pool looked like. I believe so that applicants could sort of set their expectations for if this was a realistic funding source for them and what, sort of if they had a shot at success. Not knowing really how else to put it. If the council does want to put language in the grant application, are there certain benchmarks that we want to include in terms of metrics that are within the grant? And then beyond that, do we want to set sort of a goal for us as to a range of awards that will be given within each of these application tiers?
I mean, no more than.
Yeah, or for this, and Ben had started this last meeting of looking at, that high and lows mixed up. But if we look at the, 10 being the lowest amount of under 50K applicants, we get 15. With the way those numbers all work out, we're still under our target of 12 million. And so I played around with this a little bit. I mean, there's no right way to do it, but this is a snapshot of, we're under our 12 million thresholds. The third tier, the 200,000 to 500,000 was initially 15 to 25 awards. And that put us at about 12.5 million total. But just keeping it easy with. So.
I just thank you. I appreciate this as a walkthrough of how we might do it. I will just say technically, you could get into issues where if the top ranked, the best proposals that are in the 500,000 are all at the top of you'd be over the amount. If so giving a range, instead of giving a hard number was that kind of the proposal, is to give them there might be 2 to 5 of these and 6 to 10, so giving a range and not giving a number.
Yeah, giving a sense of how many awards-ish we intend to give out, and how many total applications we received within each tier. and then how it works.
Yeah, because I could see how this could help people decide, maybe I want to apply or not, but also it gives some flexibility, like we might have some really amazing, like just like really incredible ones in the 200 to 500 range that we want to do more of. And we feel less secure about the larger ones, you know, to give us some discretion. Sorry.
No, you're okay. And looking at this, and did we ever make a firm decision if it was 4,000 per pillar? And if so, in doing that, like, how is that gonna affect this?
Oh, I believe we looked at that 4 million as the recommendation for each pillar and what we're aiming for, but we didn't vote on it. And this, I looked specifically at the application tier because both, each applicant will answer, you know, based on which tier is appropriate for their funding request. The next slide, I broke it down by.
That was gonna be the next question.
So we could look at it this way too. This was a much math as my brain could wrap its head around, so. I mean, I can talk to Ben too about trying to find a better way to present this.
I think this looks great. I
That's
just,
from the finance guy, that's a good thing.
I think we can, my recommendation would be to qualify without putting in numbers. I think we can say it's a highly competitive application. I think we might change our mind on, like, I think those on the previous slide on the recommended applications, I don't think we're, the number of grants that we're going to award, I don't think those are set in stone, that we might award 6 at the highest instead of 3 to 5. I think that's what we decided last time. So putting that in the RFP to say this is the target, I just don't think that's necessary. I don't feel that strongly about it, but I think people who applied are probably listening to this or at least reading the materials after and are well aware of the competitiveness of this. And I don't think it's necessary to put in the RFP.
I agree with you, Ben. I think it's really a guide for us. It just
Yeah.
gives us a sort of overview of what this looks like. But I don't think it needs to go to the grantees, although it's public because it's here at a public meeting. I don't think it needs to go with the application. But again, it is a great guide for us to look at as to how this money can disperse in a variety of ways.
Great. That's all I have to know.
I think I made this observation last time too, but I mean, and I agree with it still, but we are prioritizing smaller projects pretty clearly by the allocation of what we are doing here. Just with the number of awards that we got, you can see it easier on the other slide, I think, the previous slide. Just with, you know, about, you know, 4 million or so in that 500,000 range, with 40 million coming in on that. And I think that's what I've heard from this council is that some of the smaller, more grassroots projects and providers are what is a priority, but certainly some of the larger, more comprehensive, larger projects are deprioritized a little bit with this proposed allocation.
I also want to clarify with the council, we had discussed last meeting that 4 tiers being 500,000 to $1 million. Is the council only allowing applications up to $1 million?
That's what we voted.
Great, okay. I think we have about 12 applicants then that I'll reach out to remind them about our new application tiers and that they can request up to $1 million, but that their project scope may change and that's okay with the council, given the location we're requesting. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's really important to do before the grant goes out, right? Because then they would be ineligible to receive funding if they didn't scale back their project to below the $1 million threshold.
Right. Yes, yep. And then when I did my letter of intent outreach, I did let folks know that the expectation was they would submit a grant for the same project they proposed in their letter of intent and up to the same funding amount that they requested. But those applicants, again, I'll reach out to and let them know that we expect their scope of work to change. Great. There are a couple questions that I have for you all about the grant that I need confirmation on to finalize. Once we go through these questions, if there's any other feedback, comments, or suggested changes that you all have, now would be the time. First question to confirm, are we considering giving out funding to applicants who are currently receiving other forms of opioid settlement funds, either from us, from municipalities, the AG's office?
I think we said
The
yes,
municipalities.
because we would like that coordination.
Yeah.
Okay.
the collaboration.
Yeah. Are there any restrictions that we want to define for the funding or exclusions for what this money cannot be used for? Above and beyond, you know, outside.
The
of
MOU.
approved uses, yeah.
I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, so, should the SSPs be getting more money in this tranche of funding, or did they kind of get theirs for right now?
I would say that I think people have all sorts of creative endeavors that they're looking to do that may be outside of the scope of what they're getting funding for. And that I would love to give them the chance to do that because it might be a collaborative effort that's expanding their work in important ways, especially when you think about Gordon's point of some SSPs have 3 times the clients that the other ones do. And if they have a project that they really feel strongly about, I'd love to see it and support it.
I think we just, again, limiting it, just, I don't think so. But there is, because I haven't, look, there is a question in here where we ask them in the application somewhere if they're receiving other funds from the opiate settlement.
Yes, it is part of the budget where I did call
Okay.
out, you know, that is something we wanted to see highlighted.
Yeah, okay, thank
Within the
you.
budget itself, okay. We answered the question about the 10%. I vote, well,
Yeah.
Let's not go back there, yeah.
I'm gonna go to the last question then. Are we going to ask for letters of support for any of the tiers? I think this
I'm
came
a
up a
big
couple
fan
times.
on that.
Okay.
They just get people who, again, you're just gonna ask for people who love you.
Right. Well, can I just say one thing though, not letters of support, but if we are allowing sub-awards, I feel like is that a question somewhere?
Did I read it
Somewhere, but, because if we're allowing sub-awards, I do think letters of partnership, like, or letters of like an MOU, where people are saying, I agree that I'm gonna be a sub-awardee, so people don't just write like, we're gonna give money to this other group, but that group doesn't even know they were put in
Yeah.
there as like a collaborator, so it's only when money is gonna be moved, I think you usually call them like, put in a,
It's like a.
letters of commitment, yeah,
Yeah.
or sometimes it's like an MOU, but some sort of letter of commitment of the work that somebody else is gonna do for you.
So if you're a Y organization and you're saying in there that I'm gonna work with X.
Well, not that I'm gonna work with X, but that I'm gonna
But
pay X
yes,
through this
they're gonna be
money
directly there. They need to have a letter saying that they've agreed to
to
that.
do that.
Yeah, good note. Word.
So we agree, we're not requiring, what, are we prohibiting letters?
I'd say yes.
I say yes, because you just have to read them all.
I'm okay with that, I think it's an important distinction. You know, yeah, we're not requiring them, in fact, we're not prohibiting, in fact, we're
If you said.
not allowing.
Read them and we're not gonna score them.
Sorry, no, wait. I like what you're saying, Liz, and I would actually be explicitly around a simple MOU.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Like, you
that's
know,
what
a
I,
pager,
Yeah.
like people need technical assistance, we do it all the time, I think a simple
Yeah.
one, page MOU would be really helpful.
Yeah, because again, you think it wouldn't happen, but it does. You say, I'm gonna work with an organization and you've never even asked them.
well, I read
So-
out all this, it seemed like
Yeah.
that happens, so I'm acutely aware of that as a
Work with the city of
probability.
Portland. Oh, really? Okay.
And to clarify, does the council want that one-page MOU at the time of application?
Yes,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, it would be.
So is that what we decided, not a letter of commitment, an MOU?
Yeah, so an MOU is very different, so this is funny because people have said TOAs agree to partner. And then I might hear through the grapevine that and we didn't agree to partner. So to your point, Liz, that does happen. And it's very transparent, so I think a simple MOU, like one pager,
It has
would be
signatures
great,
on
the
it.
signatures.
Right.
So a letter is another, I think, I think a simple MOU is really
Yeah.
the way to go. So it's not a letter of support. If we agree to work, we could even have a sample one, if that makes it easier for people.
Yeah.
And I'm only bringing that up because with our particular application, there will probably be as many as 8 or 9 MOUs, but that just gets a little cumbersome.
So, but you're gonna subaward, you're gonna give money in your proposal, you're gonna give money to 9 other entities.
There likely won't be money going to all of them, but if you're gonna say that all of these entities, if you're gonna be, let's just throw it out there. It's a treatment court, right? And you have multiple people that are on the treatment court team, organizations that you're saying you're going to be working with, and that they have committed to say that you're gonna be part of this program, or that they agree. You see what I'm saying?
Well, you could also do an MOU
Because-
that has, if it's like that,
It could
where
be a
everybody's
blanket.
doing the same thing.
It could be a
You could-
blanket, but I'm just saying that I've run into issues when you're talking about the Maine judicial branch, when you're talking about attorneys, when you're talking about Maine pretrial services, and you're talking about treatment services.
But you could have one MOU with multiple signatures on it, that they're all agreeing to do this one thing.
And Bruce, are they all getting money? Liz, where you started, like, if
Yes.
it's sort of a partnership, that's one thing, but you're sort of suggesting words in your mouth, but if it's money exchange, you do an MOU, so would money be going to all the
No.
recipients?
No.
So I think that's, what I'm saying is it would be good to know who's getting the money, and if there's an agreement. Cause cash is king.
And in your, I mean, to your point, Bruce, like if your whole project hinges on the Maine judicial branch doing something, you might wanna show that they're involved and say they're gonna do it for the purposes of showing the council.
And
that
that's my point.
You can actually do it.
Nothing against the Maine judicial branch, this is like, this is public. But it's been very difficult to get an MOU for any of the treatment courts in the state of Maine, never mind an MOU.
Even the ones that are currently happening?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Cause there is a lot of lawyers in that building. Lawyers, I'm not got it
I probably just said something I shouldn't have said.
Got it. No, I mean, I appreciate that. I like
Tina?
that understanding.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, thank you. Yeah, I have the same concerns. I mean, for our pretty large project, like we don't have MOUs, but we have contracts in place. And so what we did was, letters of support for the grant. So I just wonder if we could just ask for letters instead. But our organization moves very slowly, and I don't see us gathering a whole bunch of MOUs very quickly either.
For letters of commitment.
That's my differentiation, because letter of support is just like, oh, we support, but letter of commitment is different.
So
That's
we
fine.
could
Yeah,
say
that's doable.
commitment or an MOU in the grant, whichever. Does that make sense to people? You could say either or, a letter of commitment, not committal, commitment, or an MOU with collaborating partners for the grant.
Sorry to even complicate this more, but I do agree with Liz and Joe that if there is money, if there's subcontracting and funding going to these folks, an MOU, I think is.
Okay, we can put that in the language.
But I think that's Keena's point, that maybe that's hard to do, to get an MOU in 1 month from these large.
You only have
organizations.
30 days to turn this around.
So, but to get a letter of commitment, I'm sure you can get.
Yeah, that's easy.
Because MOUs have to go through legal of all these legal departments and might be much harder to get in that short period of time. Sorry, I'm retracting my.
So we're back to either or.
Back to letter of commitment.
Just a letter of commitment. All right,
At the time of application.
okay, in time of application.
And I'm sorry, what are these for?
For like so if I am partnering with I'm giving an application that says my project hinges on the partnership with these 3 other entities. I'm paying them to do some of this work, that those entities sign a letter of commitment saying I'm committed to this project and doing the scope of work that's been laid out in this
But only if there's
application.
money involved.
Correct,
I think it's money involved.
yeah. If I'm saying a collaboration,
Chassie and I wanna open a treatment center, which would never happen, just so we're clear. We'd have to have a letter if we're both getting money, but not if we're just if the project hinges on the relationship.
just if you're exchanging money, so if you say, I'm gonna collaborate with all the other treatment centers.
Money.
In our situation, there's no, I just don't. It would be presumptuous of us to write this application without getting commitment from the judge, from the attorneys, from the
Right.
district attorney, from, all of these different entities within a treatment court.
It could be something like if there's
Even if
a,
they're not getting any.
it could be like, there's a partner, if there's a partnership in your application in which their partnership is vital to the execution of your project, please submit a letter of commitment. So that it could be money or like the main.
Or my relationship with you is really gonna depend on
Well,
the
vital.
success of
Yeah.
vital to this
Right,
grant.
like you might need
Yeah.
a lease from a landlord that you don't wanna sign a lease with until you get the money, so you'd get a letter of commitment from the landlord for a lease? No?
You could lease somewhere else. I guess it's like if I'm saying my project hinges on Opportunity Alliance doing something. That I would need to say, Opportunity Alliance is doing this thing, part of this project. They've agreed to partner to do this thing that's vital.
That guarantees that we know that they have had a conversation with Opportunity Alliance versus, I think it's a good idea, so I'm gonna put it in the.
I read LOIs in which they said they were gonna do partnerships, that I'm sure those people have no idea that they were written into that LOI. Like the way it was written made it clear to me that they had not asked somebody at another organization whether that was possible. They were like pie in the sky, so we wanna make sure. So I think it's like, is there a partnership that's vital? Do a letter of commitment, so it's not these letters of support, like, I think they're a great organization, it's like, I'm gonna do the things that they wrote in the application.
Okay, got it, thanks.
All right, Carrie?
Those are the big questions that I had. Can we go to the next slide, please? We're gonna get into, RFPs for contractors and future support roles. And as part of that, I do think we should include a grant management system. But for us to get this first grant off, and not have a manual process, that would be cumbersome for me, and I don't think the best way for us to do a grant. United Way uses a software called Smart Select, and I've looked at a couple different platforms. It's very user-friendly from what I've seen. It also is a platform for applicants to complete a complete a grant application, and we can also assign reviewers to those grants. This package would be a year-long subscription for us. We can start at the base level and upgrade if we need. We can also potentially use this to replace Qualtrics, because it does have a survey feature, and our Qualtrics subscription ends in October. But my recommendation to the council is that we move forward with Smart Select for this first grant. The cost of it would be $2,000 for us to do that and to have a portal for which we can publish this grant.
And as somebody who is absolutely not tech savvy at all, I have used this. And I can do it with very little assistance. It's like the 3-year-old. I can do it, and for the most part, with United Way has like 100 reviewers. They have very little difficulty. And again, the reviewers stem from people with very little technical knowledge to those who are very tech savvy.
Well, fine, do you need a motion?
Yeah, do you need a motion?
Oh,
You can
Miles?
also start the
She just
subscription.
loves it. Yeah, what'd you say?
You can start working on building the grant, 15 days before you're required to receive, payment. Great, so that's great
But
for
we
us.
need a-
So we can get this out.
So I would
I
like
can
to
start building.
Can I make a motion?
Yeah, for the paint.
I would like to make a motion that we allow for payment of, however much it costs by Smart Select.
I second that.
Miles, second that, he loves it, Miles loves it. Great. All right, if no other further discussion, will you call a roll, please?
Liz Blackmore,
Yes.
Lydia Crafts. Joe Everett.
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Courtney Garriott.
Yes.
Pat Kimball.
Yes.
Ben Mann.
Yes.
Bruce Nunn.
Yes.
Miles Olet.
Yes.
Eric Small. Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Tina Takarar,
Yes.
Chastity Tool,
Yes.
Paul Vinsel.
Motion carries. It does. And thank you very much for the vote of confidence, and we will go into the computer age.
Just, Brenda, do we need any additional information in that vote?
I would need to see, think through how we would pay for it. I would just need to probably be part of the sign-up process. I'll help my office,
Software work
through it. But with the vote, I think we have the authority I need internally to say that we're ready to go to place. We'll figure out.
Within
that.
15 days,
All right.
What's that?
within 2 weeks, do you think it's manageable?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Can we talk to them?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited for this portal. I'm not too.
I'm excited.
All right, wonderful. So before we move on, that goes through the questions that I have for you all about the grant application. Are there any other changes, questions, updates you want to see made before this is put into a final grant in this board?
Can I just say thank you so much for all your work on this and for the work that, that perhaps Barry Dunn did, but it looks great. It's really great. The questions are really awesome. I think it captures like all the little concerns that I have that I want to make sure we know. The only question I have is about the timeline. For some reason I thought, and I'm assuming it's because we're just backed up into other timelines. I thought we decided on 45 days for people to write. And I see that it's less than 30, and so I was just curious if that's because of like the timeline of when we need to get it to the council.
That is, yeah, it's to get the evaluation process completed, or the scoring process completed, by the November 14th council meeting.
Okay,
Which is the last council meeting of this council.
right, okay,
That was the goal.
okay, got it. But perhaps in future, we'll try to give people a little more
Yes.
time.
Yeah, and my hope is that, they know this is coming. It's built from the letter of intent.
Yeah.
That applicants have a sense of,
Yeah.
hopefully what they're getting into.
Thank you.
Not an ideal timeframe, but
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense because we need time to score all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Starting when-ish. They start, the proposals, will go out the 20th of September. The announcement will go out.
That was
That was Miles.
Oh, it's mild.
He was asking the question because I don't think they can see this.
Oh,
Or
okay.
maybe you said.
So the application announcement and posted is the 20th, but remember, you're asked to apply. It won't be a public notice. Then the proposals are due the 18th of October with the hope to be voted on the November meeting, and the notice of grant awards will go out to them by December 15th.
for the proposal due date, I'm also comfortable with moving it to the following week in October. I initially had that, based on my hope that we could use this portal and get the grant out sooner than maybe anticipated. I pushed it back a little bit, or I moved it earlier, I guess. But if the council wishes to extend it by a week and give applicants an extra weekend, I think that will be doable with our process.
So October 25th.
Rough Friday.
Sure. Give them extra week till the 15th, the 25th.
The more time you can give people, the better personally. I mean, it's really hard to write these as much as it seems like it's easy. It's actually really not.
Okay, so we're giving them till the 25th of October.
25th of October.
Yeah.
So that would give us, about 3 weeks to score them.
Yeah.
Mary,
I don't know, I just got this an hour ago, so I'm trying to go quickly, should we add a disclosure somewhere at the top about if you go over count, it will be redacted?
Yes, and this portal can cut you off.
Oh, gotcha.
I did ask about it.
Done.
That's what
Can't
I'm-
come over.
Sweet. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And I will have a disclaimer in case for whatever reason it doesn't, or if I misunderstood, but I did ask.
It's gonna count for you and cut you off.
Did we leave out the question about live your living experience this time for a reason?
Yes. Because it wasn't. Because we weren't able to evaluate it for the letter of intent, so I didn't include it here. There is a question about
We gave.
there's a question about the
we gave a
population.
point
Or is it focus? What's that?
We gave a point for it.
For it on the letter of intent.
Oh, that,
Demographics, but.
oh, yes,
We kept that one.
we can include that. Is that fine? Brendan?
For what it's worth, the council's November meeting is scheduled for November 14th.
Yeah, it's November 14th is our November meetings.
And I think 22nd is on the council.
The only thing I'll say, Courtney, is that when I was reading LOIs, I felt like I read some that said yes, but I know their organization, and I was like, I don't think that's true. And so I don't know how we verify that, or if we just like leave it up to them and we feel okay about it. I was like, okay, you say yes, but
Yeah, so I read a bunch of those that I also felt the same way, and I still gave them the
well,
point.
yeah. 'Cause they
In
said
grant
yes. I
committee,
can't not.
You cannot if they answered
in
it.
grant committee, what I had suggested for that problem was a list of board of directors and bios of key staff. Pat doesn't like that idea.
That's not me. I can tell you in
So much
general,
more.
boards don't like that. A lot of organizations that have boards, when you
Listing-
require a bio, it's one thing to say names and dates and
No,
maybe
I said-
occupations. But if you're asking for a bio for a
That's all I
board,
said. I said list of board members' names and bios of key staff.
yeah, and
I thought we did too.
So, yeah, I think that we talked about the key staff bios.
Yeah, that makes sense.
that makes
Really
sense.
important.
It's
And that I
the
think
board.
important list. It's on our website, so I think.
Okay,
So are we putting in the question about lived experience? Is that going back in?
Well, but I wouldn't,
Just-
Hold on for 1 second.
but our board name's gonna tell us if people have.
Right, it's not.
lived experience.
No bio.
No
No
bios,
bio.
unless they include it
We're
in it.
kind of trusting them, to be honest, though.
No, Leah, you're right, no, we won't get that answer. We kind of talked about that at the meeting.
in, question 5, in that table, the last column is, asking which staff is sort of responsible for the completion of each activity. Could we ask for just bios in that part of it? Or do we want to have a separate?
I think I asked that actually.
Okay.
I guess I come back to like, who is the judge if someone has lived or living experience? Like, it's such an. It's hard. It's what we want, but
It's really hard.
like, even if someone then self-discloses in a bio, like, does that mean that they do? I guess it just feels so subjective.
I think we just leave the question as it was and.
Well, what about Courtney? I feel like there is this part in here about how did you come to to choose this as there's, where is that, section? It's about,
4B.
yeah, 4B. So what specific community needs does your project address? What opportunities for input and involvement through the communities your project focuses on? Do you plan, how did you come up with this? I think that's like, maybe there's another question in there. I mean, I guess this one, what opportunities for input and involvement from the communities your project proposes? Do you plan to provide? I mean, sort of like a question in there could be like, what specific community needs does your project address? How did you make that determination? I mean, I think that's the question that gets at, who did you talk to? Is this coming from the people in the community that you're proposing to work with?
Trying to process, so.
Well, I mean, agree with a lot of things that have been said. I think you could rework one of the 4B questions to get at this a little bit. I mean, I think we should do everything we can to encourage collaboration with and input from people with lived experience. I think when you try to translate that into a requirement or give extra points and rely upon goodness knows who to make the decision, what is your lived experience exactly? I think it's different. I think the best we can do, we've set a tremendous example. People that appointed this group, we probably have the most people involved with lived experience amongst the 15 of us who, and again, we don't require people to disclose it. We could have more than 4 people with lived experience. We just happen to have 4 people who have, are recovering out loud, so to speak. So I think when you talk about what opportunities for input and involvement from the communities your project focuses on, do you plan to provide it to make it inclusive and collaborative? It's pretty worthy anyway. It seems like you could get at, even a statement that says we really encourage involvement, inclusion of people with lived experience. But I wouldn't give extra points for this or that. I think it's very subjective. And we just continue to make those points and maybe refine the language a bit in 4B. But I wouldn't be giving extra points or demerits for people for lack of that. That's my opinion.
Just to note that, this may not be the right part of the discussion for this, but the application includes language notifying applicants that whatever they submit is publicly disclosable. And it could be, subject to FOA, we can't keep any of it confidential. And they are cautioned to, if there's anything that they consider to be sensitive or that they don't want made public, don't submit it.
Based on the LOI, don't we already have this information?
Yeah.
So if we wanted to consider that information in conjunction with the final applications, wouldn't we already have them? So we need to.
Based on the feedback, maybe it's not, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get there quickly. Maybe I'm more interested in who is implementing the project and their experience in implementing the project. So maybe it's a question about, yeah, I think I agree, 4B. I think it's like an additional question about why is this project important? What's this, why, what, who? It's a who question.
That's on 4A. And
Oh, it, yeah,
the
4A.
table on 5 does ask for
Yeah.
the key stuff, and we can do bios there.
I apologize, I got
No.
it an hour before and I needed processing time.
Totally.
Okay.
So I will add staff bios in number 5, and I will also look at reworking the language of 4B and then bring that to program and grants on Tuesday to have final say. Okay. Is there anything else? Yeah.
Just one other thing to say publicly, will the application notify, as I understand the council decided, that there will be no appeal process?
Correct.
Yes, and will be language added. I think I have a drafted to run by you, but there will be language talking about no appeals or reconsideration. And that the council's ultimate determination over.
It's fine.
Right, with that,
Can I ask a
we'll,
question, your question, did we get any feedback about the LOIs from any?
we did, I received feedback, I think from about 20 applicants who were not invited to move forward. I asked them to submit a Qualtrics link, I sent out a survey, so I'll have that for next time. And I will encourage, once this process is over, maybe in December, January, for us to have a dedicated meeting to just like a review discussion of this whole process, so that we can move forward and improve and all together decide what went well, what didn't, and hopefully have even like an outside facilitator come in. That'll be very important.
All right. So can I,
Yeah.
who's hand, I can't say, oh, Ben?
Thanks. Just a couple, excuse me, other considerations for the grant award. We're okay with the same organization or the same executive director getting multiple awards?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Different project, but yeah.
I just I just jotted some notes down when I was looking at LOIs. And also, I would be curious about thoughts. I think I would be in favor of this, but I if the scoring process is going to be the same, I could see us. Are we going to take the straight quantitative score without any further discussion? So only the highest scores get awards, or might we discuss a certain project that didn't score the highest but scored high and want to prioritize that? If we're going to do that, I think we should say that we have the ultimate discretion. We don't have to say this because we obviously have this discretion, but I think we should state that irrespective of this, we're going to score it quantitatively, but we reserve the right to make awards on how we see fit. But I'd be curious about other council members' thoughts on that.
I think that's absolutely true, particularly where we don't want it all to be, again, I think Liz and others pointed out that what if all the top scorers were all in the top category or all below, that we have the right not to necessarily award by the top scores only, that we have our discretion to look at that.
Yeah,
However,
so-
legally you word that, it's a good point.
And between pillars.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's.
I do think that'll help us. I think we should state that explicitly on the grant application though.
All right, so I am gonna, maybe it's okay? Yes. So I'm gonna interrupt our meeting for just a little bit because we have some guests here that are gonna do, I made them promise a 15-minute presentation, but I want the council to be aware of the work that they're doing. And for those who were not at the governor's summit, Attorney General Aaron Fry talked about the evaluation process that they have invested time and money in, and the council is part of that. So this will be the team that'll be working with us on evaluation, and be working with us on reporting out, even doing an annual report, however we want to do, but this is the team that'll be doing. It's the Substance Use Research Evaluation, SURE, which is out of the Catherine Cutler Institute in USM. And so they will be working with us. So they're just going to do an overview today. We will have time later on at other meetings to ask more questions, to design what we want, to work with them with their website and all the other pieces that are involved. But we just wanted to today, just to bring them here for 15 minutes, so you see how they fit into the work that we do. Mary and I have both met with them, but it really should be the full council that has the opportunity to see that. So at this point, I am going to turn things over to the very capable hands of Lindsay and her team to share with us for 15 minutes.
Right up here.
Yeah, and I apologize, guys. One of our members, Katie, had to leave. It's senior year for one of her kiddos, so
totally
she
understand.
had to bug out. As Pat said, I am Mary Lindsay Smith. I go by Lindsay because who wants to be Mary Smith? That's not fun. As we're loading the PowerPoint here. And so our team is the Substance Use Research and Evaluation team. We are at USM, housed in the Catherine Cutler Institute, which is part of the Muskie School of Public Service. And we are going to be spearheading the work for the center. And so really what I wanted to do today, and I'm not going to repeat this as Pat just said it, so we can flow through this, Katrina. So just, I mean, I think most of you know who we are, but for those who don't know who we are, we're a team of applied researchers, evaluators, and policy analysis who are really passionate about improving the health and well-being of individuals, communities, and families impacted by substance use. And we've been working here in Maine since I've come here 10 years ago. I founded the unit and have built a team, and we're really passionate about the work that we do. We're community engaged researchers, and so that's the approach that we're going to take to this work. And we come from really diverse backgrounds. Rachel's an epidemiologist, my PhD is in social work, so we kind of have a lot of different expertise. Katie, who had to leave, was in Medicaid policy for a really long time. So we have a breadth and depth of skills that really align really great with this project. And so that's our team. Not everyone's with us today, but we've got a great team, so. And so I think for those of you who are at the summit, here's the mission of the center really. Our goal is to expand the capacity of communities to address the opioid epidemic by providing support, resources, technical assistance, really what you need, right? It's for you to come to us and tell us what resources we can support you in doing the work. So we kind of laid out an infrastructure based on past work that we've done, standing up other centers. We're a strategic partner in the Center on Rural Addiction out of the University of Vermont. We've taken some learnings from that and put that into this model. But as we know, the money's going to be coming in over 18 years. The needs are going to be changing and evolving. And also, we're not here to drive the bus. We're here to be a passenger and support you in doing the work. So it's really important for us to make sure that you know that the types of engagement and the level of engagement and the services are really driven by the end user. So the center is for everyone in the state of Maine. People are going to be There's lots of people who have interest in just understanding what's going on with the opioid settlement funds, groups like you who are responsible for distributing the funds, and then we have a whole host of people like those who you're going to be giving money to who are going to be implementing the work, right? And so it's our job to support people across that whole spectrum. And so we're trying to think of, how to create an infrastructure that provides various types of services and various entry points for engagement. Next slide. I don't even know what the next slide is. Okay. So how do we think we're going to do this? When we were meeting with people and designing the center, we really thought about how do we do this? What are kind of the 4 pillars of the work? So for us, I think identifying the needs is going to be something that needs to be ongoing. Obviously, as we start to pump resources into communities, what the gaps in capacity are going to be shifting. So a big part of our job is going to be identifying real-time community needs and corresponding evidence-based practices to support expanding capacity. We're going to deliver technical assistance that align, as I just said, with what individuals' needs are, groups' needs are, and also what emerging trends are, again, as emerging trends in drug use patterns, as well as emerging community needs. We want to disseminate education and resources to support the work, policy briefs, toolkits. The website is going to be the backbone for a lot of that, as well as information. We'll talk more about, the evaluation piece, obviously, reports, impact reports, things like that. And then, of course, support the monitoring of the use of the opioid settlement funds to improve transparency about the spending. So where are we in the spending process? How are the funds being used? And then, of course, the pivotal piece is, monitoring the impact at both the local and the statewide level. And so the center is here to support kind of all these activities. And we want to do that, as I said, in a community engaged way. So working together. Next slide. So what is the intended impact of having this center? Why create a centralized place to do this work? And what do we think our impact will be, right? What's the point of pumping resources into a center like this? So we think, particularly with the political subdivisions, we hope to be able to work with them to help facilitate the timely creation of spending plans and making sure those plans really align with community needs. So giving them information that helps with that. And of course, supporting the enhanced use of evidence-based strategies. We really want to promote data-driven programmatic and policy decisions. A big thing that I know that I think is important for this council is making sure, and for everybody really, that we're improving communication coordination and collaboration. There's a lot of work going on in the state related to substance use and addressing the opioid epidemic. And so we want to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, that we're leveraging each other's resources and expertise, and that we're really working towards promoting sustainable infrastructure. Yes, this is a lot of money, but it really isn't a lot of money in the scope of things. And so we need to be working together to make sure that we're leveraging each other's capacity and building capacity in a way that we can sustain over time. Of course, there's the transparency piece, and we want to be making sure that we know where we are in the process. Where is the money going? Is it being used in the way we intended it to be used? And are we having an impact? Looking at that in real time. And then bolstering sustainability. So to me, the evaluation piece is a big piece of sustainability. So without ongoing monitoring and evaluation and understanding the efficacy of the programs and policies that are being put into place, you can't get additional funding, right? So we want to be setting up programs to be able to go out and get additional federal funding or funding from foundations. It's a really important piece of this. So making sure that we're setting up our partners in the state of Maine to be successful and getting additional funding into the state, we really need to be on top of the evaluation and monitoring piece. See, Liz shaking her head. She does. So the core components here, I'm gonna turn it over to the others to kind of talk and introduce themselves. But we thought about this as kind of 3 major buckets of services that we wanted to offer. And so we've organized them into cores. So our outreach and communication core, our community engagement core, and then our monitoring and evaluation core. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenna first to introduce herself.
Jenna Godo, I think you want to go to the next slide. I think it might be the next one. So my name is Jenna Godo. I have a couple of people that I've met in the room before, especially Liz. My background's in prevention, substance prevention, youth substance prevention specifically. But I joined the team here and I'm doing and overseeing the outreach and the communication side, which is essentially, I'm the name that you should remember right away so that you can reach out to me for that first step, that engagement piece of trying to figure out where people are at, what do they need. If you want to refer people in your communities to me. Courtney, I heard your name yesterday. I met with a city councilor here. Your city manager yesterday. He was wonderful. So one of my roles recent has been really engaging with subdivisions and making contact with them saying, hey, we're here. Introducing ourselves and introducing what we're hoping to offer and see, really I'm trying to understand the lay of the land for where people are at and what their needs are. Because again, the outreach and the communication piece is really important, but it's also driven by what your needs are. And I think that's the important piece of the center is that we really want to make sure that we're responsive to the needs of the community. So that outreach piece is me saying, what do you need? Where are we at? And all of those all the pieces that Lindsay mentioned regarding the communication and coordination and really making sure we're all on the same page and we're working together collaboratively. I think that's a big piece.
And the next slide is Rachel.
Rachel Gallo, I know people in this room. My background is epidemiology, but I also really love working in the community and working with community organizations and partnerships. So our core is really going to be responsive to the community and what they need. So if they really need someone to come in and facilitate discussion with different parties, we can be there for that. If they are saying we really need data on this, we can help facilitate the collection, analysis, or presentation of that data. We work with a lot of different audiences, so we're really used to translating data and information into a usable format. And really, we're going to be responsive to the community. So we're not going to walk into a community and say, hey, we have this for you, or we think you should do this. We really, along with Jenna's team, or Jenna, coming and talking to the communities and asking them what would be helpful to push their work forward. And all of our cores kind of overlap. So we're kind of
we're all, we all sit near each other. But really, if Jenna sees something that's like, oh, this seems like an area where they might, subdivision might be having difficulty with community engagement, we can come facilitate or, recommend best practices. And we'll have all sorts of toolkits and things on our websites, but sometimes it's better to just talk to a person about it. And actually, if you want to just go to the next slide, I can.
You want to stand in as Katie?
Yeah, I'll be speaking as well. So, because I also do a lot of monitoring and evaluation, so Katie was in Ghana, who left, is heading up the monitoring and evaluation. And looking at the, the proposal that you're putting out to the community, there's a lot of things that local nonprofits or for-profits, whoever, will need to respond to about how they're measuring and implementing their actual work. So I saw the SMART goals in there. So sometimes people might get stuck on that or need help, so we could be a phone call away to help with helping people or organizations understand how they can actually monitor or track the impact of the work they're doing, beyond just reporting what needs to be reported to a funder. And then hopefully we'll be able to get a glance of like what's happening across the state and tell the story of how Maine is, addressing the opioid epidemic or SUD in general. So we'll be tracking and assessing progress of the opioid settlement funds, but also hoping to kind of assist with telling the story of how at the local level change is being made.
Mackenzie, you want to?
Yeah, I can introduce myself really quickly. My name is Mackenzie David. I'm the research and evaluation coordinator for the team.
She'll be floating around.
Yeah.
That's right.
I float between all the cores, and it's just kind of having the subdivisions tell us what we need and me kind of going back and getting it and finding it on the internet or in our libraries, wherever we can. So a lot of my background is in community integration and harm reduction.
So who and how? So the next slide, okay. Lots of arrows here, guys, but this really is just meant to symbolize, as you already know, how complicated this is. There's lots of people working in this space, lots of different MOUs with buckets of money. And so when we first started conceptualizing this is why we thought there would be a need for a center, right? So how do we facilitate pathways for communication and coordination? And so the idea is that the center kind of serves as this body that can be here throughout the course of the 18 years as really the knowledge base that can facilitate these communication pathways. We are going to be developing a communication plan. But really, one of the things that we want to do, right, if we hear repeatedly, for example, from the political subdivisions that there's an ongoing need, but they just don't have the capacity or the funds with the amount of dollars that they've got to address a particular issue. Maybe that's something that we want to bubble up here. Maybe that's something that the council wants to tackle, right? So how can we help facilitate more bi-directional communication with what's going on between the political subdivisions and this group, but also all these other players on this board, right? There's a lot of things happening here. And so the goal is for us to really help facilitate communication, but also coordination. So we're really working, Jenna's working a lot to try to make kind of those connections. When we hear, there's people who are interested in addressing a specific gap that are geographically close together. Can we partner them together to build capacity in an area? We want to try to set up some learning communities. So things like that. Again, if there's interest. I don't want to push a learning community on people if there is an interest, right? But some of these things to try to help us have better communication about what is going on in this space. Next slide, please. And so this is really kind of the meat of it, right? This is how we're engaged. We're thinking about the engagement pathways. And so the idea is that, of course, we have multiple audiences here and groups and individuals can engage with the center at various points in time and with various modalities at whatever level they would like to. And so obviously the backbone is the website and the resource library, and that is where we're going to have a number of data dashboards. So we will be having a center dashboard, which will create transparency about our activities. So that dashboard will have information on, you know, the types of engagement that we're doing, what parts of the state have we been touching, where have we not had engagement, what are we doing related to that? So we'll be checking ourselves in this process as well. We will be having, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the spending dashboard, which will give some information on, you know, information about where we are in the spending process, what the dollars are being spent for. And then, of course, this is gonna be the backbone of the resource library, which is gonna have a lot of information, toolkits, and our space for dissemination. And then you move over, we have some very specific services that are targeted towards the political subdivisions, and this is the learning communities I was talking about. Some of these community profiles, I think, will be more broadly of interest more broadly. They're tying into a vulnerability index that we're working with the state and Marcy Sorg and her team at the Margaret Chase Smith Center to create. But there's some intensive services that we're really trying to work with the political subdivisions on. They're a different group than kind of who you're targeting, right? People are coming to the Maine Recovery Council or organizations that are already kind of working in this space. So we've got some more intensive services for the subdivisions who might need a greater level of engagement. And then as you move over, we get into the consulting and technical assistance. And you'll see that's where we've got your box coming in up there as an additional consumer of other services, including the data and reporting, best practices, and any other spending plan development work that's more again towards our subdivisions. But this is how we kind of see the pathways. And again, it's really self-defined by what you would like to get out of the process. I know we have talked with Pat and Mary when we think about the SURE team and in our portfolio in general, the buckets that we work in are grant development and grant making, obviously the technical assistance and capacity around evidence-based practices, and then the evaluation and monitoring, as well as data analytics and data visualization. So I think that aligns with some of the needs that you have. And this just kind of outlines how we see these pathways. Next slide. And this is just a summary of how the goals of the center again. So, you know, providing startup support. I mean, again, I think some of this is what we're talking about here. Education and resources. Rachel brought up the facilitation. We think there's going to be a big need for that, especially as time goes on, helping to keep collaborations that form initially to support work as it becomes 5, 10 years, you know, providing support for facilitation, helping people create goals, show progress, fostering best practices. Did I stay on my time?
You did. I'm proud of you, Mary. Mary and I worked together before.
Thanks so much.
Questions that you have of them? Like, again, we will certainly,
Super quick. Hi, I'm really glad to meet you all. We're very excited about this. So a couple quick follow-up questions. One, on the transparency of opiate settlement monies, particularly at the local level, there's no requirement for municipalities to report that. Are you guys hoping that through relationships you're gonna get that?
Yeah.
Okay. Second follow-up question. Well, there's a couple. Is that gonna be forward facing to the community? Like, are you gonna have like a platform that I can go in and be like, what did Augusta spend our opiate settlement on? And I can dig into the data?
Yes.
Okay, so we can report, the council here can report all of our stuff to you and you make
Yes.
a map?
So
for us?
so one of the things we've definitely always been in agreement on is that we are going to host a specific dashboard for your information as well. So I think when I think about some of the topics that we've had, that we've talked about. I think there's a dissemination, like what can we do to help you with dissemination? And I think one of them is this piece, like having a dashboard that shows what you've done thus far. How can we support you in relation to like evaluation and monitoring, and any other technical assistance pieces, but yeah.
Okay, so there'll be a dashboard of this much money went to harm
Yep.
reduction, or this much whatever, and then also outcomes too, so like, this money has served X amount of people, distributed X amount of syringes, background
Yep.
data, et cetera, so that's great.
That's our hope, yeah.
That is wonderful, I
And-
love that.
And again, it's, I mean, I think we've talked about some things, anything we do with you, we would like to do collaboratively. So like, how can we support you in defining performance measures that would go into that dashboard? And I think in Rachel's slide, you saw, from our perspective, we want any of your grant application, whoever is, awarded, to make sure that what we're asking them to track is actually stuff that is gonna relate to quality improvement. It is not onerous grant reporting. We want things that are gonna be useful for pushing the work forward, as well as producing useful information for transparency as well. So your examples were great examples of outcome metrics that we might want in a dashboard.
Okay, and then my last question, which might be a harder question, is that if a municipality spends the money on roads or something, would you guys be reporting that out if you had that information?
Yes. I mean, so the idea of the center is for us to kind of be an impartial third
party,
right? So
Okay.
we're an impartial third party, and we're here to report out information as we get it, and that our hope is to create. Thus far, I can say that we've had a really great response from the political subdivisions. And I mean, we've only done outreach for what, 2 weeks, and we've met with 10.
No, we have, we've met with 5 or 6. And we have 5 more, or it's just been every day, I feel like there's another person that says, hey, we want this, oh yeah.
So when we looked at other people's dashboards that were reporting out on engagement already, like our engagement, our uptake for people wanting to meet with us is quite good. So our hope is that we will get engagement from the municipalities, and that we can build a quality relationship, and we would have access to this kind of information, and we would report it out.
Okay,
And in your dashboard question too, I would just want to point out that Mackenzie has gone through every single state in the United States and looked at what they have on, if they have something, what are they reporting out? And we have a UNE student who is going to be working with us this semester, Spencer Kupra, who's going to be helping her with that project. Like, what are other people reporting out in dashboards? What's not like user friendly, so we're really digging in, and we will come back to groups like this before we put a dashboard up and make sure that we're aligning with what people want to see and that it's user friendly.
Wonderful, I'm very excited, thank you.
And we will, again, as, we just wanted for you all to meet them. We will certainly be having meetings with them there, that we can develop our own dashboard and what we want. And again, when we talk about, we talked earlier about being overwhelmed with the work that we do. This is the evaluation piece, and that now we certainly have technical advice to be able to move forward with that. And I can share with you, at no cost to the council funds, that the Attorney General has paid for this out of his funds. So we don't have to take any funding from the work that we're doing here, which I think is just great and very generous. But if you don't have any more questions, we will certainly hear more.
Just, no funding required for any of the progress monitoring?
There's we don't have.
From the council?
From the council, correct.
Yeah, so to clarify, it's not really clarifying, but to answer the question. The Attorney General has provided funding for the center to create it, to do their work. And as Lindsay said, we're not, the center isn't, forcing the subdivisions or anybody to work with them, they're making their services available. Same with, the council, to the extent that the council wants the center to help them with the council's evaluation work, that funding is there and it's available.
And from our perspective, we would love to do that, because obviously to connect the pieces with what we're doing with the statewide evaluation, it would, right? So going back to the diagram with all the crazy arrows, we can also apply that to the evaluation. So there's stacks in the evaluation. So our goal is really to get engagement from the political subdivisions when we're working with them, to get them on board with evaluation as well and get them feeding us data. And so we would certainly wouldn't want to not have your evaluation data as well. And a big piece of the local level data is that it provides the context that we need to inform the statewide data, right? So if we are looking across communities who might have done similar projects and build capacity in similar ways, why might metrics look different? And so without that rich kind of mid-level, local level data, or data from your grantees, that makes that very difficult. So that's that rich contextual data. And I didn't say this earlier, but I would like to just mention this, that we are mixed methods researchers. So we are not just numbers people. We do focus groups, we do interviews, like that is a big part of what we will be doing in this evaluation. This is not just all numbers. We want voices of people who are using the services. We always also talk to people who are implementing the services and leadership, because you need to understand at all levels in order to have the full context. So I just wanted to point that out, because sometimes people think we're only talking about kind of numbers, quantitative data here, especially when we mention these dashboards, and that's what's really been put out there thus far related to the opioid settlement funds. But from our perspective, that's just one small fraction of the story. So I wanted to say that as well.
All right, well, as I said, thank you, your team, thank you very much. We will be in touch, I'm sure, members of the council, and figuring out where we're going with our reporting out and how we do that. But again, thank you for waiting so patiently for us today and doing the quick presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. There's one less thing that we have to worry about is the dashboard and the evaluation. This team can certainly give us what we need, and we often had conversations about what are the municipalities doing, and we'd be able to do that without having to do that research ourselves. So Mary, I heard Ben had to leave, so in his treasurer's report, he said that basically it covered most of the discussion that he was gonna do. He was gonna report out a little bit about our finances, but he said he will bring what we learned today back to the finance committee and report out next meeting when he had to leave. But we wanted to talk about
our evaluation committees.
Yeah.
And how that will happen. If you could build the presentation. So the process that I'm recommending is that and I think we've discussed this a couple of times, we bring in external evaluators to support the grant review process. For a number of reasons. One, given how short our time frame is to actually score them, as you all experienced with the LOI. It would be a full-time job, if not more. The process, go forward, please. The process by which I think we should do so, and this comes after talking to a couple other states, as well as NEHAP, about what their recommendations look like. I propose the first step is the council starts with some initial outreach of working with your colleagues, your networks, to essentially to start to create a pool of potentially interested reviewers. For people who aren't interested that you talk to, if you could give them my contact info, what I will then do is start to send out surveys where we can gather a little bit more information, see if folks, are available during the November window we're looking at. Ask just some preliminary questions about their experiences as evaluators, and what they do. And really that's just for us to start to create sort of a database of reviewers who we can pull from if and when the time comes, not just for this grant, but potentially future grants. I recommend it's structured similar to the ad hoc prevention committee when we do establish who the reviewers will be. So they will meet once and do a training altogether and then be assigned their grants to evaluate independently with a given time frame. Next one, please. My hope is that if you all are willing to start reaching out and helping to recruit some volunteers who are interested, by our October council meeting, we can have a list of who those prospective reviewers may be, and we'll have a little bit of information about them. And then we can have a more in-depth conversation about who will be invited to participate in the grant and, you know, be invited to serve as ad hoc evaluation committee. The number of people we need is variable right now. I anticipate it will be close to 20, given how many grants I expect we will receive. And that also includes members of the council being involved in the process to some extent.
Are you saying 20 on top of us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And again, it would be reviews the folks do on, you know, on their own time. We'd give them a due date and again, have that one sort of meeting all together to go through a couple of trainings, the scoring rubric that we decide and whatnot. Ultimately, the goal of this evaluation committee is to provide a recommendation to the full council, similar to what I do with the letter of intent, of which applications should move forward and receive funding awards. My hope is that by the November council meeting, we can have that recommendation ready. It may mean that we need to wait until December to officially vote, but at least the council can begin to have those discussions about which grants we want to potentially award funding to.
Half of us be gone in December?
Potentially. And so that's why even if we do the official vote in December, I would feel as though this council was involved in the decision-making process if we can make sure that recommendation takes place in November. Does that make sense? Sort of. I mean, theoretically, we can do the vote and discussion in the same day. I just know that could be an option depending on, I don't know what type of discussion right now to honestly anticipate with the grant. It may be pretty clear cut for us, or it may require more than 3 hours for us to move through those recommendations.
So Mary's asked at this point that you know people that you think would be interested in doing work with us, that you submit the name to her. Would you want us to ask them before we submit the name to you? For instance, if I think I know somebody, should I call them and say, "Hey, would you be interested?" And then give the name to you, or just do it cold turkey?
I think either way, I would leave that up to your discretion. I will probably mention that I was given their contact by whoever sent it to me.
I think, for me, I think I'll ask the people that I'm thinking about asking, and then give them their contact information to you. Okay.
How hard would it be to just do an open call like the Attorney General did when he was calling for members of this council?
We could do that. I essentially see this as a similar process, but we could post something.
I feel uncomfortable being like the keeper of who gets access to this process, like I just feel really gross about that. And so I think everybody that wants to spend their free time doing this should have access, so, I don't know.
I really like that.
Yeah, we can send it to our networks.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Do people have to have evaluation experience?
Something that, I mean, that's ultimately for you all to decide. I think what could work is if the open call could include a survey where people answer again some very basic questions. And then we can determine if we want, to reach out and gather more information. I do think there's a question of if there are certain experiences, and this is one of my questions here, or qualifications that the council wants to prioritize. That would be something for us to consider, especially when it comes to, professional background experience, if we wanna have harm reduction experts.
Could we keep
Scoring
it
harm
simple
reduction.
and replicate the makeup of this council that's already been drafted and?
Or you can, they also have to have internet connection and they have to have a computer.
And availability of the first.
So like in the LD, there was, well, between the LD and the MOU, there's like 15 seats here. Could we just replicate that? As the grant?
I don't see a problem with that.
No, I mean, you guys
That would
can,
be, give us 30, right?
yeah, I mean, you can do what you want. I'm sort of reflecting on the issues, you know, it's a small state. This council was made, you know, with a lot of deliberation, and the members of the council were involved in a lot of the work on this issue around the state. If you're bringing in external reviewers, how are we handling the connections they may have? I don't know how it happens with, you know.
To the United Way, you're asked to disclose conflict of interest. So the United Way, they don't do any vetting, like ask for a resume. They do, the only thing they ask is, you know, when you're assigned, if you have a conflict of interest, and if you do, then they'll either take you off that grant and put you on that particular one and send you another. Ironically, they use close to 100 people. And the information that these 100 volunteers do to review these grants, keep it pretty close. We haven't had like lots of leaks out saying, oh, did you see this? It's, and they don't really vet them again, but most of the people are people that are, again, members of the community, and they're trained. And through the training, they make a determination whether, you know, they want to go through it. And you will get very experienced people to people that just want to do this and just want to review and do it. But we've had very little trouble with the reviewers themselves and information leaking that shouldn't be leaked.
Do we exclude anybody who's connected with an organization that's applying?
Yeah.
Yeah, like blanket statement, you can't have an application pending at all, you can't.
If you work
can't
for,
have working for,
like if you're on board of an
Let's
organization.
say volunteer.
working for, or being on a board, volunteering, I think the Barney,
Oh, yeah.
recently, and they have like a big million.
Correct, you may kick that out half a Bangor.
I'm not saying that this is what I want, but like, this sounds like a ton of work.
It is.
Are there just, and I know nothing about evaluation, is there a professional service who would evaluate this? Like, can we?
Or could we just do it? I mean, it's getting less work every time we do this.
The actual evaluation, I think, once they get into the software, isn't as hard as it
Right.
was the LOI.
There's less of it.
I'm gonna disagree with that as somebody who's read a lot of grants before. I mean, it's a lot of work to do these. There's so many questions and so much to read. I guess I'll say that the question for me is, do you want evaluators who know nothing about the topic and who've done evaluation before, like of grants? Or do you want people who have some knowledge, like baseline knowledge of the topic, so that they're evaluating it with their mind towards, you know, I mean, I think that's part of the conversation. Like, I've done federal grants, but I do them only in the substance use realm, because that's my area of expertise. So I don't purport to be able to do one for, I mean, they don't ask me to do one for like food insecurity, you know, they asked me to do it in this. So I do think there is something about that. I think you can do evaluation where you're just like, did they answer the question? Did they, you know, that kind of, like, is this a good answer and do I understand what they're gonna do? I think that then leaves us, so if you have people who just give you like points on their basic, how they answered the questions, then that leaves us with more some like qualitative understanding of, well, is this gonna impact what we hope to impact across the state?
And there is 3 people reading each grant, so it's not one person, there'll be, each grant will have at least 3 reviewers to it.
Would we just do what we did last time?
Basically,
Okay.
Well, I read 51 and like, I can't read 51
Will there
applications.
still be less this time, because there's way less applications.
But the application will be far more robust.
So long.
Okay.
you know, ironically, as someone who, because my field of expertise is so small, for instance, when I do the United Way ones, I have so many conflict of interest with substance abuse, I can't score those. I scored childcare, food insecurity, basic needs, which is not my expertise.
But you're like, feel fine about doing them, yeah, because you're.
Yeah, because you read them and again, you're supposed to read it at face value, not
Right.
say, oh, I know them, that's a bad
Right,
thing.
right.
Yeah, so again, so that's, works out, and that's what, again, because with this particular example, the people that are applying for the substance abuse money in Eastern Maine, I have some connection with, so
Right,
I'm right out of the picture with it.
yeah.
That's my concern about inviting the general public, and there are 163 applications. Figuring out conflict of interest, I just.
Yeah,
Does United Way have like contacts like across the state, and is there a way to contact people who've done reviewing for United Way? And ask them, like, do you have folks that you think would be interested in doing this? So that it's like people who've done some reviewing before, but it like touches the whole state? I don't know, just trying.
I love that idea, and I don't wanna, I think there's what, 10 United Ways, Pat, or gonna be less than, I don't know.
Yeah, and they meet regularly.
And like, but I mean, like, if we could pull from their pool.
Yeah.
They train them.
But
They,
community
it's
members-
amazing to Pat's point, how confidential these
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
keep it. As a grantee for like 150 years, we do not know, nothing gets leaked. I never hear through the grapevine, like.
Good.
So I think tapping into that network. Is a good idea. Because they're all trained, and to your point, they can score outside, what people think might be their expertise.
Not knowing anything about how the review process really has worked in those circumstances, I'm reflecting on the fact that this group was appointed to have the decision-making authority to distribute these funds around the state. How does the review process not usurp that authority? How do you ensure that, this group retains the final decision making?
The final decision is, the way I see the process is, they don't have the final decision, they're scoring grant.
So are you gonna rely on those scores, for example?
You could ask them.
It's superseding our power, just.
Okay, so
Giving us
it's,
data.
you have to have some level of trust in the volunteers you're doing, because I can tell you, the amount of work that's involved here, the 15 people sitting around this table don't have the time to do it. They don't, and if you really want them to be scored in a timely manner, you're gonna have to elicit some volunteers and trust that they can do it. The ultimate decision is the council's decision. But I don't know how you're gonna do this process, and you have to eliminate anyone around this table who has a direct conflict of interest. So all of you couldn't do a lot of the LOIs because of conflict of interest. Liz and Nate, Lydia, and then Courtney.
I would just say, as someone who's, that responsibility to make that decision is incredibly high, which is why I ask, is there like a professionalism? Is there a way, like we're relying on outcome measures from professionals who do this from the SHORE program? Is there a way that we could feel confident that the information, the data we were getting from those scores comes from a reliable source, which is why, like, I think paying people, or there's some
Like philanthropy that does this a lot, maybe, like where their staff.
Again, I think Maine Community Foundation is developing this arm. I think they are wanting to do this work.
See a comment from.
Courtney had something too.
Miles,
Very
done.
I can ask, from what I understand, I don't, but don't vote on that.
I'm just really concerned that we're gonna end up in Bangor City Council's position where they subcontracted out their reviewing process and then they superseded everything.
That
Threw it all out the window.
So someone who is directly involved in that, there's a whole piece of that that didn't work. And again, partly that was the council chose to not go by the recommendation of their hired people.
Right, so
So-
that goes back to Brendan's point that we're superseding our power to the volunteers that we're bringing in. When we were appointed to do that.
Again, from the very beginning, the grant process was flawed. the actual, and again, I was a scorer. The grant process was not, the grant was not one of the questions, and those were about the city.
Well, I guess my question is about what the scoring looks like. So when I've done scoring before, you do score and then you write comments about did people answer the question? These people didn't answer the question, and you put, and you say how you give a little summary. I don't know that everybody.
In this software, it's in
So
there.
it'll do that. So I mean, to a certain degree, we will all have to read all of those. Like, I think if we can have access to people's scores and summaries and see the multiple summaries that people are, I mean, in that way, if we wanted to have other evaluators, because we can't read all the things, we might be able to. It depends. This is why I wanted the LOI to cut people out so that we could have less applications.
Yeah,
Because
we
it's just gonna be
didn't cut
so hard. I know, I feel like I kept advocating for like don't do less, because you don't wanna, and just for these people's sake, like, this is so much work to fill out those grant applications. I just hope that people aren't just like so,
And in the
and they
software.
should have to fill this out. But to have it be a limited amount of people so that there isn't 160 organizations doing this, there's 30. But that's for next time. But I guess I'm saying, like, if we do have people who are. What's that?
Were you here last time?
She was here for the conversation.
No, you weren't here in August.
No, I wasn't here.
Oh, you missed the cutting.
I saw the cutting, I watched the video.
Oh.
I would
See, there's
have
no
gone more,
comment
I would have gone more cutting.
You were saying.
Cut more. I was like, oh,
And I
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I guess I'm saying that you could, Courtney, we could have, I mean, I don't know how many we'll have and how many evaluators we need, but we could have it where the council then is able to read people's comments and scores so that we feel like we're making an informed decision when we agree or disagree with whatever.
So in the evaluation that people do, they'll score it, the numeric scores. Then there's a place that says evaluators notes that you can read. There's also evaluator questions.
Per section.
Per section. So you're able, and it's right there up front and you can do it. And depending on access, you can get access. Everyone can have access to that. The question is, it is now 4:30. We have to be out of this building, remember, by 5, which means we have to be done by 4:15 so they can pull down computers. Mary needs a decision here in regards to, and I'll include me in this. We were under the understanding that that the council was not opposed to outside evaluators coming in to help us with this process.
Correct.
So if that's what you don't want anymore, we now have to relook at the dates because if you're changing courses, the dates that she's got here for this to go forward, in my estimation, are not possible.
Can I make a recommendation?
Please.
What if I reach out to organizations in the state who have qualified, experienced grant reviewers? Try to gauge, share with them this opportunity, see if there's interest. And then I can have a list for the council of potential reviewers who have done this work and are very, very qualified to do it. And they will work in conjunction with members of the council to score grants. And we can assign it so that each grant is scored by at least one member of the council.
I don't know what everyone else thinks. And you can have that done by October 10th.
Yep.
Which gives us time to train.
I know.
Again, that's the only thing I'm concerned about is if that goes by October 10th, we have to ask people and then get them trained. And the grants are due the 25th.
I mean, I do feel that if we can get that list finalized by the 10th, if they're qualified and experienced reviewers, they will have conducted pretty robust trainings, and that I think that puts us in a better position than if it were just general call to the public. And they will have experience with completing those applications to a level of detail that will allow the council to make informed decisions once you read through all of them. I am worried about the amount of time it will take. And then if just the council scores, we would be doing a disservice to ourselves and the applicants. If we feel like we have to rush through the grant.
That's fine.
Okay. And that way they're on board if we need them, and if we don't have to have all the external reviewers. Type of thing.
Can I just take a litmus test that we were, that's the one word, of whether you'd want to compensate reviewers, because that's a whole process in my office that I gotta figure out. Yeah, like how to pay 20 random people.
Pay them?
Is that what we're talking about?
That's too bad, because anyone I was asked, they would volunteer their time.
If there are
I mean,
trained,
that's what I'm asking.
yeah, if there are trained people who are willing to volunteer, great.
Yeah,
We have one volunteer, the former CEO of
Yeah.
ASAM.
Yeah, former CEO of ASAM. She's retired here, living in Maine.
We should also pay people if they can't volunteer.
I'm always pro paying.
Me too.
what dollar amount we're talking about?
The only time I've ever been paid is when I did them for MEHAB.
And
We paid people who didn't do it for their work during our Cumberland County process. And we paid them and we made sure we did it hourly and it was less than $600, so they're not employees, like all things, the legal labor laws. I mean, if you pay them more than 600, you get in big old trouble.
Up to
And
$5.99.
so
You
I just
do
want to
about
point
it.
out
Yeah.
one thing. To get money out is absolutely impossible. So make sure that we have, if we're promising people that we're going to pay them, that we have a way of doing it in a timely manner, because every time we try to request money, it is not an easy thing. You don't have a checkbook. So that's all I'm saying.
So we don't have a
Keep
way to pay invoices.
What? We don't have a way of like,
To
I'm
pay invoices.
asking, do we have a way to pay for invoices? If somebody put in an invoice,
we do contracts and like Mary will send us, you know, effectively an invoice of, you know, here's what I've done in the past 2 weeks. You know, we pay that. But
And I sign
you have to
off.
get the whole system set up on the front end. She has to be put in the system as a vendor, she has to,
Right.
you know, and so forth.
So the question is, if we hire people, do they all have to be under contract? And then how do we pay them?
But I have to do some research.
Okay.
To find out if, under this scenario, how, what do I need to do?
Can I begin reaching out to folks and say that we're still determining if they'll be paid, and every reviewer would have the right to say, I'm not interested. If we can have it done. Okay, great.
Can I separate on the other way again? That, like, do we think it's a good idea to reach out to United Way? I mean, it's like, it's 10, like you, literally, Harry, you could, I can definitely do Southern Maine or Lit. I just think that, to me, they're like a natural, they've got these people
Yeah.
that might be willing, like the retirees that,
They have experience in substance use?
well, I think you were considering talking to like philanthropic organizations to do this, like Maine Community Foundation, MEHAF.
so yes,
That's
Southern
more-
Maine, they have, because they have their 3 areas. So.
So like,
Cabinet 3.
Right, well, Cabinet 3.
so
Is,
yeah, so the United Way in Eastern
substance
Maine
abuse.
is basic needs, substance use disorder and child care,
Yeah,
child development.
why don't I reach out and, again, pitch what we're looking for, and then they can send me interested reviewers, and we can go from there. And hopefully, there's far more people who are interested than we actually need, but if we have them to pull from, I think it's the only way, again, to do justice to the process.
So they've been, for the payment piece, if we are able to do that, would it be easier for us to make a payment to United Way and then they pay whoever the reviewers are instead of the AG's office doing
That might,
multiple people?
yeah, I was thinking about that. I mean, in that scenario, you would, you know, contract with, Way, the Maine Community Foundation, whoever. It sounds like to manage the reviewer process. Sounds like some overhead, but I think that's possible.
I don't know if it was so much overhead, more just we need their roster.
But if we're gonna pay them.
I don't wanna like scare everybody about the payment piece. I'll get started on figuring that out.
It's beast.
Yeah.
I know from my own organization, like it's beast. It's not fast.
I mean, yeah.
getting people through all
It
the.
sounds like, I think I'm gonna.
Well, I don't know, we had to get W-9s and we had to do like a form, and then we didn't do. The W-9s was only just in case we messed up and went over 600, because we can pay them without a W-9.
People just send like an email of here's how much time it worked.
They created we have like a little a stipend form that they fill, but they have to fill it all out with their hands.
Can I borrow it?
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm not sure what Cutler does, but they are top notch, the Cutler Institute.
Yeah.
So as we,
Oh, yeah, you
like,
asked
we
that.
already have a partnership going with them,
Yeah.
we all do.
Well,
And they've got a lot of staff and a lot of different services.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, an important point here is that we are, the Attorney General, hired, brought on the Cutler Center with a focus on providing resources to the subdivisions. They're, also, providing help to the council for example, the dashboard, the evaluation piece. But we're clarifying what specifically the Cutler Center's, resources to the Recovery Council could be. The Recovery Council could use like the online library and, see what the metrics are and so forth. There's gonna be a lot of overlap, but the extent to which the Recovery Council wants help from the Cutler Center, it may be that the council has to hire the Cutler Center to do those things. So that could be an example of the kind of thing where council says, Cutler Center, we want you to help us. That the council would pay for that, most likely, but we're still clarifying specifically that role vis-a-vis the Recovery Council. The Cutler Center's, primary focus is on, as we see it, on subdivisions, but recognizing it's all interrelated, there's gonna be overlap.
All right, so Mary, do you have enough direction to move forward?
I have enough direction to interpret next step, yes. And make the decision.
That was a very tactful answer. She's good. She did really good. She did.
And in October, we'll have a list
Okay.
with the names of their organizations, and in case there happens to be multiple people from one that we can just contract with, great. Or we need to figure out how to do that.
Well, I thank you for your patience. We went over. We did not get to contracting services. We will put that on the top of the agenda for next time because we need to talk about that. Getting Mary some help and contracting the services out. For the rest of the people, unless there's other business to come before the meeting, I will adjourn. Move to adjourn. Done. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all on Zoom. Thank you.
The issue.
I feel like I'm not.
It's not just.
I'm not great at that.